Welcome to the September 13th, 2022 Medfield Board of Selectmen meeting. This meeting will be held in a hybrid format. The Board of Selectmen will attend in person, and members of the public may attend in person. And we have a pretty good crowd tonight. In addition, members of the public who wish to participate via Zoom may do so by following the link that's available on the meeting agenda that you can get from the town website. Just a quick disclosure, this meeting is being video recorded and will be broadcast, I think, streamed live on Medfield TV. For the people here in the room, if you have any comments to make, we have a microphone that we'll ask you to use. The microphone does not amplify. There it is, right next to Bill Massaro, who's we've named the microphone after. It's Bill. At any rate, the microphone doesn't amplify your voice here in the room. It's the audio feed for Medfield TV, so that's why we ask you to use it. And at this time, I'd like to take a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of the country, but I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the passing of Carl Schwartz. Carl Schwartz is, in my case, a fellow West Point grad. He graduated in 1963, 12 years before I did. He was a Vietnam vet, was the past president of the American Legion. In my case, I knew him because he was the American Legion key contact for Boys State. And so on a number of occasions, he was at our house for two of our boys who went to Boys State. For anyone who doesn't know, the American Legion, to the best of my knowledge, the Medfield American Legion sends more boys and girls to Boys State and Girls State than any other town in the state. For some of you who are familiar with American Legion, before the sale of the property to Aura, the Legion itself, just because of the demographic downturns that occur with veterans, was probably not in the strongest financial shape, but to the best of my knowledge, the American Legion has never turned down an applicant who wanted to go to Boys State or Girls. This is not a competitive thing. Even when they were in some of their toughest times, they still send Medfield students to Boys State and Girls State. And on a personal note, I have always looked with appreciation at Carl Schwartz for bringing a positive, appropriate level of crustiness that I think was appropriate for our boys to get exposed to as they grew up into responsible men. So on both a personal level and just kind of a connection, and for the role that he's played for the town over the years, I was awfully sorry, although he lived a full life, but I'm sorry to see that. So if you would, thank you. Okay. Let's see, we are having an executive session, so we have two more, okay. We will have an executive session at the conclusion of this regular meeting. We'll have a vote to enter the executive session for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. That will be a vote at the end of the meeting, and we will not be reconvening at the conclusion of that closed session to come back into session here. So appointments, we have Chris Carlin to discuss recycling receptacles at town events that are approved by the Board of Selectmen, including Medfield Day.
Hi, Chris Carlin, 212 Causeway Street. I'm also a member of the Transfer Station Recycling Committee. We just like to request that during the permitting process that the Selectmen also request of the vendors or sponsors that they provide adequate recycling receptacles at their events.
Comments?
So just a silly question, is that at each table or kind of, so it can be a couple of them laid out in areas? Like I know where behind, next to the post offices, there tends to be a lot of the sporting teams do things there. But they're not really selling food or water, but people may be walking by to drop off trash. So what would be your ideal layout?
More of a, like for example, the pond there where during the summer they have events where there's music and vendors and drinks. Just have some adequate containers where people could put them in if they want to. Okay. We've done a lot, the recycling committee's done a lot to kind of educate the town on recycling, what can be recycled, and we kind of, if they want to recycle, we want to be able to have them the opportunity to do so.
And do we have extra things to leave around town?
So in terms of, I believe you're referring to Zealous Beer Garden, and I did speak to them immediately after I received your letter in May, and somebody had stolen the recycling container, and they assured me they had replaced it immediately after that event, and they said they would keep one there, but they provide their own trash service as part of their licensing agreement for that site.
Okay.
But I think one of the larger questions, and I believe that's why Russ Hallisey is here tonight, is how we would do that for Medfield Day.
Exactly.
So I think that's, Russ, I think you usually provide private trash service, but that's going away, I believe I was told.
Yeah, so Russ Allison, 11 West Street, for the record. So historically, we had Dover trucking. Can you hear this way, this the closer?
Totally.
People can
Doesn't-
hear it at
doesn't
home.
amplify.
Yeah, no, I know. Historically, we had Dover trucking who volunteered their services in their truck, and they went around the campus. We have about 20 barrels around the campus, and we figured the more the better. If you have the trash barrels, people will use them. If you don't have them, people throw it on the ground. So we learned that lesson early on. So they would go around the campus a few times during the day, emptying them, and then put them into their dump truck and then cart it away for us. Last year, they were going out of business, and they've been going out of business for a few years. And finally, last year, they said they couldn't help us, so we ended up getting somebody out of Norwood who volunteered to handle the trash for us, again, for his benefit as a sponsor of our event. So he did it last year, and he's going to be doing it again this year. So yeah, we tried doing recycling maybe 10 years ago. We bought a 10 or a dozen of those bins that are wired structures. They have clear plastic bags on them, and then they have the plastic cap on it that had holes there for your bottles or cans in particular. And we found that we were very disappointed that the townspeople just willy-nilly threw trash in the recycling bin. And it was pretty obvious when you look through the bag. It wasn't these opaque bags that you could. And so we were very disappointed that it was just a total failure on that. So we might have even done it for 2 years, and then just stopped using it. So, I mean, recycling is good, very positive, and we all support it, but I think that when I read the letter that that was actually sent, it seemed to be a little bit more onerous on the part of the event putter-oner. Things like, he was using the word, monitoring the trash barrels and things like that, which we obviously don't have the staff, the volunteers to do. And Chris had a conversation with me today saying that no, he's not quite looking for that. And as he said tonight, it sounds like they're just looking for receptacles. And if people are willing, to go ahead and separate them, then maybe that's all there is. But then I also question, when it gets to the transfer station, how is it going to be handled once it gets to the station? I mean, what kind of onerous kind of responsibility is the highway department puts a dumpster at Medfield Day, and the stuff gets thrown into a dumpster, and now it gets carted away that way, since Dover Trucking isn't doing it. But when it goes from, Medfield Day in particular that I can speak to, when it goes from our campus to the transfer station, is there going to be any other obligation on the part of the highway department on how to handle it?
Well, I would assume we wouldn't put what's in the recycling receptacles into the large trash dumpster.
But the point is, you've got now bags coming out of the recycling barrel. What's in those bags?
Right. Do they follow the rules or not?
Do they follow the rules and stuff? And now what's it's going to have to be separated. It's going to be double handled, or which you wouldn't expect the highway department to do that. Open it up and go in and sort. So I really question. Now, As I said, to Megan last year when she asked me, and I said to Chris, this year, well, we tried it, it didn't work. We're not interested in moving forward on that because we can't do it. But yeah, I'd be happy to, have Memo talk to, meet with them and try to figure it out. Because I also think it's a little bit more detailed oriented. What exactly is allowed to be put in or to be put into the recycling and what isn't? And I think over time that has changed. So I don't have a clear understanding on what all the items that are acceptable can go in there. Like in particular, the cardboard boxes for pizza. If they've been, if they're clean, they can go in, and if they have oil, grease in them, it just seems like to me it's changed over the years, and I'm not exactly sure. So I think it would require for us to go forward is to actually really sit down with them and figure it out and see what can be done and maybe what can't be done, what is practical and what isn't. And if it's as simple as putting barrels out, two next to each other, say in the food court area in particular, maybe if we put two barrels next to each other, one with a sign on it for recycling and one not. But again, how does it get handled at the transfer station? How do you know what's going to work or not? Now we could also put up those. When I talked about the recycling, little bins that we bought 10 years ago. The clear see-through, only the holes that will only take now cans and bottles. Does that make sense to do that? And at least the cans and bottles can clearly be denoted and recyclable. But the other stuff really, there's a lot more involved, I think, to implement this in the right way.
So Russ, let me just touch on that a little bit. I think anytime you can recycle is a good thing. As you state, there are issues sometimes where recycling gets tainted. I think our Transportation Recycling Committee has done a really good job over the years that educating people on recycling habits and what goes in, what goes out. There's the constant contact, the constant transfer station emails that go out. So I think we have a more educated community that are more apt to recycle than not. Now there would be some things that would taint the recyclables, but I think for the most part it's worth doing. I think that if there's some things that can be pulled out, our guys can do that when they bring it down to the transfer station. If there's certain recycling bags that are just fully trash and recycling, they would have to go onto the tip floor. But at least anything that we can recycle is going to be better than not recycling at all, I think.
So the idea is, and I knew that they talked with you today,
Yep.
Before I had a chance to follow up with you on this. So you really feel that you're not having a problem with it?
I don't think so. I think, like I said, I think that our communities are more educated now with recycling habits down at the transfer station. It's the same thing. I mean, when people recycle things, they know what to recycle for the most part. There are certain things, everybody does the pizza boxes. Some are cleaner than others. Some are, when it goes out to E.L. Harvey and he brings it out to get it processed, they do allow for a certain percentage of trash in there. They expect that. Not everybody's recycling is going to be 100% clean. So, but like I said, if there's something that's really mixed, we wouldn't be able to take the time to go through everything. But I think for the most part, I think it's worth the effort to have it there.
Yeah, so I mean, in the spirit of what of trying to reinforce recycling, I support in spirit, but I'm intrigued what you guys.
I think that this falls into the category of a series of things that the select board should be doing in terms of creating best practices. And clearly, having people recycle is a best practice, so that we want to encourage that. So I think that, Chris, I appreciate your suggestion. I think it's one of the things that we should do automatically in terms of permitting is ask people to have recycling available to people as a result of getting permission to do something in town, because we know that it's the right thing to do. And it sounds like the transfer station's gonna be able to handle it, so.
Can I ask one
I would
more
hope that Memo could do it this year.
So Mo, so when I bring my recyclables, I have cans, I have plastic, I have cardboard, right? So-
We have single stream recycling, so all goes into one container.
Right, so in theory, most of the trash from Medfield Day is recyclable, it's just the raw
As
food.
long as there's no food waste, as long, like if you have, a plastic container or a styrofoam container or something like that, shouldn't go into recycling, especially if it has still liquid things in it. But for the most part, like I said, if there's, 90% is all recycling, if there's a little bit that we can take out, like I said, not every recycling is 100% clean. So the people that do take it away do understand that it's going to be some sort of, when they separate it at the plants, they know there's going to be some sort of contamination.
For something as involved and as populated as Medfield Day, I would suggest that you just recycle bottles and cans and nothing else. And just let people throw their trash away, because I think otherwise it's
Could
gonna
be,
get.
signs could be put on those, those bins, try to get as much recycling as you can, and, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's when people are eating food and things like that, they think it's recyclable, but if it is tainted, so maybe that's a good idea, just the bottles and cans for this particular event.
Because those are clearly recyclable, so.
And that could just be one bin, so it's not even clear or metal, it's just everything but something that's got food in it for all intents and purposes.
Okay, Chris, I've got questions. So Chris, your request here, I think, was that the Board of Selectmen adopt a policy that whenever we issue a license for, I guess, food or drink, that we would have a policy that whoever gets the license needs to make provisions for recycling of waste. So we kind of had a two-level conversation just now. We had the town policy about issuing licenses, and then we had a specific discussion about Medfield Day. So I want to be clear, the thing that's really on the table here is you've asked the Board of Selectmen to adopt a policy to, basically, whenever we issue a license, that we require whoever's running the food or drink operation needs to have provisions for recycling of materials, or of waste. That's the real question that's on the table right now.
Yes.
So let me start with that first, then we can deal with Medfield Day in a second. So there's a couple of questions that I have around that. This is really directed at us, this is not directed at you. The question is, do we have anyone who comes and asks for a license for food or drink that is a small enough operation that it would not be reasonable for us to expect them to procure receptacles? And where I'm really going with that is, does the town need to get into the business of having receptacles on hand that people running licensed events can borrow, use, and bring back?
I don't think the town wants to get into that
I agree
business.
we don't, but I also don't think the town wants to preclude small food and beverage, or drink, beverage applicants for, because now we're talking about the COA, probably, wine and, one day beer license. Well, okay, but you gotta have this, so I'm trying to, I agree with what you're saying, Pete, but I'm trying to also think of all the kinds of people that will come to us for licenses, and I'm particularly thinking about the one-day beer and wine licenses that various organizations have, and I'm trying to evaluate, is it reasonable to, part of me says, yeah, you guys go get a Husky barrel out of your garage that you use for the leaves in the fall, put a sign on it that says recycling, and you'll be complying. So it's I would rather stay out of the business, but I'm asking the question before we go pull a policy, and then suddenly a bunch of people get blown out of the water because they can't afford $100 worth of barrels
So
for
the
all
way
the
that I
different
would
kinds of
approach
recycling.
that dilemma, Gus, is I would create it as a town policy. And then I would give exemptions if it's a situation where it's such a small event or something that doesn't make sense for some reason. But, evaluate those on a case-by-case basis, and
Well, I'd feel a lot better if we have a policy. If we have a policy that exempts people on a policy basis, like if we're saying, well, this isn't for one-day beer and wine licenses, or for one-day beer and wine license, we will encourage but not require, or something like that, as long as we're making that decision. But I don't think we pass a policy and then sit there and say, but we might make exceptions to the policy, but we're not sure when. So you and I are both being sensitive to the same issue, but we're trying to figure out what the right way is to handle it. So I'm not really arguing with you in the principle. I'm just trying to think through the practical option that we're
I'm just trying to be
working with.
practical. I think it's a good idea, and I appreciate Chris bringing it to us. I think it makes sense to implement something. And if we run into situations that are problematic, then I think that we just say, oh, that doesn't seem to work there, so that we'll exempt somebody. But I think in most cases, it should work fine.
Well, can we ask in the permit application, recycling is required? Does that present an issue, or so that we can kind of get ahead of
I
that?
don't think so.
I think it's fine.
I think that would be fine. And I think that, so let me keep going on this. So what I think we're saying right now is, no, we're okay with placing the obligation to provide the receptacles on whoever it is that's getting the license, which probably says we won't control standards for what those receptacles could be plastic bags.
Exactly, just right in the middle,
So we're not gonna control that. We just want you to recycle in whatever way makes the most sense that you think is gonna work. I'm okay with that. So just as a case in point, let's go to Medfield Day. So who is it we are requiring would have to have the receptacles for Medfield Day? Is it Memo? Is it every station that serves food? So is it more like, not that Memo has to do it, but that actually anybody that you have that has a booth where they serve food, it would be Memo's responsibility and Russ, you can weigh in on this. If I'm worried about a problem that's not a problem, you just tell me, don't worry, we can just handle it, don't worry about it, guys. Is it that Memo would need to make sure that booth renters are aware of town requirements, and therefore on a booth operation by operation basis, each one of those booths would be responsible for complying with the recycling, not Memo volunteers in the entirety for the entirety of the area? Is that how we would want to work it?
So I think we might want to break this up into two pieces. The vendors themselves in the food court, it's possible that you may want to put we may want to put a requirement on them to handle their own waste from their booth, but not require people who buy the food from them, not require the vendors to worry about the food product and materials once it leaves their booth area. So that would be maybe one, and then we could require the vendors, which we can't require right now because we didn't tell them in our registration process, and I don't think they have enough time to deal with that issue. So in the future, maybe your consideration
I'd ask
could
them
be
this year.
that.
I think you could ask them.
But once the product is on the campus, I would think that it would be likely Memo's responsibility, and no, none of the vendors to be required to do
And
it.
that's a reasonable burden to put on Memo.
On Memo?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it's just simply putting the receptacles out and in this case, I'm thinking maybe even just bottles and cans this year. I could put those 10 receptacles out, which are clearly recyclable markings on them and stuff. And then those could be handled for disposal, and everything else just gets thrown in the building. We could do that this year because
Try that out.
we have them, and it's just putting
I
We-
think
we-
most people, I know you said you tried it 10 years ago and wasn't very successful, but most people now are trained when they go to an event, whether it's outside or indoor, people are always looking for where their trash goes and the recycling goes. So I think we can do it.
so
And
for
if you
this
still
year.
have the 10 containers, that's perfect. You just put those out, I think that'll solve it for this year.
The ones I was just talking about, the recycle
Yeah,
bins.
you said you had 10 of them. If you could put
Yes.
those out, that I think would solve it for the year.
Okay.
You might have to monitor them because they might fill up, but
Oh, no, there's no question about the monitoring and to get them taken away and replace them, but not to go through them.
Okay.
And, you know, I do agree with, you know, Christine and Mo. You know, maybe the town is a little bit more educated and willing than it was 10 years ago when, you know, we first tried it. So if in fact, you know, we can put out those recyclables this year, and we'll see how it goes. And we could always, you know, have another conversation with the committee if they had other ideas going forward. But
Okay.
and as long as the highway department is comfortable with that as well, because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the disposal.
Chris, that sounds all right to you? Okay. Pete, the point about the policy, you know what I would do? I have no problem with us putting a policy in that's just a provision of all licenses. But the way to get to your point about exceptions, put that in as a provision of the license and put a clause in that provision that says, in the event that you do not feel you can reasonably comply with this,
Sure.
bring your concerns back up to the Board of Selectmen. Not too many people are going to want to do that, but if there is some real hardship, then they can bring it to us, explain the hardship, and then we can call it that way. I feel better about that
Yeah,
than
yeah.
having the exception. Yep.
And even put some statement in there about better have a pretty good reason.
Yeah. I mean, because you're right, we're already doing it, and if you only need a plastic bag,
Well, I'm not sure, though, where we're going with this in the future. I mean, this year we'll put out the bottle container things, but there's all kinds of other recyclables.
Right.
I think that everybody's concerned about,
Right.
and that's going to require a lot more thought and figuring out the logistics and all, and manpower, I think, going forward on full recyclable requirements. Unless you're willing to just let me just do bottles and cans forever.
So I have two pieces for that too. So Chris, this is not throwing anything back at you specifically. It's actually a comment to all of the multiple groups that we have that are concerned with environmentalism in the town. I had a son who was at UVM, and I got to go to some of their events, and they had it took you 5 minutes to figure out how to throw your hot dog plate and your Coke away because of the instructions on, and they had a student who was full-time there to help coach you through the process. And after 2 years, I still needed the coach. So what I'm getting at is there may be this is an option, I'm not arguing for this, but if, in fact, whether it's Sustainable Medfield, whether it's TSARC, whether it's whatever, if there were an opportunity at times like Medfield Day to take the recycling issue beyond just simply making sure that people that serve food put out an extra barrel with a recycling sign on it, but instead, if it ever made sense to have the recycling component actually be supported by our environmental organizations in the interest of education, to where you might actually have a more extensive recycling operation. I'm not talking about this month. I'm talking about, to your point, Russ, down the road, it might be useful to think of that as an education opportunity to actually train people in more responsible recycling. In which case, we might actually embrace more extensive recycling, at least at Medfield Day, in the interest of community responsibility. And that's a good time when everybody in the world is going to see it, so it works. So it's just a thought. First town council, then you can.
As somebody who actually ran Medfield Day for a number of years and has some experience, it's actually going back a step before that, because from an education standpoint, you probably should advise your vendors, don't use styrofoam and other
That's the other thing,
non-recyclable products to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a good point.
Chris?
Yeah, just as an aside, I think 10 or 15 years ago, my wife and I actually did it for Medfield Day because the Girl Scouts were supposed to do it and it fell through. So my wife and I actually did it, where we walked around, and it wasn't that onerous. But to your point on the, I think the vendors themselves need to know. And what we've done as the TSARC committee is I don't know if you've seen in the Hometown Weekly, we put a tip out every week of what things, and we can do that for Medfield Day, of the things that they might see at Medfield Day, what you can recycle and what you can't, and kind of in advance of that, just so people know, like paper plates not recyclable, paper cups not recyclable, so, because people think they are, just to kind of educate, and we've been continuing to do that with the constant contacts and the tips, and I think people are starting to figured out, and as Russ said, things have changed over the years, so we've, you know, pointed them to sites in Massachusetts like Recycle Smart, where you can just kind of type the word in, hey, coffee cup, can I recycle? And it'll say, no, you can't. So, so I agree with you. I think there does need education, and we're definitely willing to do that.
Chris, it's because of that complex of cups and paper plates that are, you know, they're paper, so we think of them as recyclable, but they're apparently coated, so you can't recycle them. But that's the problem, I think, so that I think you want to just do bottles and cans on a place like Medfield Day. Just make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is, like, I know we're on the lines, but there's a lot of cardboard boxes too. I think you wouldn't want to exclude those, because those are fairly obvious that those can be, you know, to most extent. So, and I think most of the vendors wouldn't want to have to haul them home anyway, so if there's a way for that.
Yeah, some restaurants are serving things in cardboard containers now, but, and so that always
Yeah.
begs the question as to whether they're recyclable, but, you know, I think it's just safer on a day like Medfield Day to do the cans
Yeah.
and bottles and
No, I
that's
just mean
it.
if a box of chips comes in cardboard, that could be recycled, but you're right, the takeout containers are very dicey, what can't be recycled. So.
Some of them are actually biodegradable now.
Yeah, some of them
Yeah.
are, yeah.
But that's not recyclable, you can't put it in.
How about you can throw them in the compost?
Got a comment over here, Chris, and then back.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Potts, 7 Kerr Street. Just from a suggestion, an idea on the policy standpoint, we were at an event this summer where they had water stations, so they didn't have water bottles, they had water spigots, so that people could go and fill up their water bottles. So I'm just wondering whether you want to put in some kind of phrase on the policy that says, you know, maybe alternate ways of conservation of trash would be considered, or something like that, to, you know, leave it open for some creative mechanism to
Oh.
reduce trash.
Well, I don't think our policy would ever preclude finding ways not to have any materials to recycle at all. I don't think the town wants to get into infrastructure.
Right.
But if they don't have waste, then they don't need to worry about recycling it. And again, if our town organizations think it's worth education, you know, the effort to educate vendors, I think that's great. Back to
They
Russ.
brought in, this event, they actually brought in a service of some sort that had the water spigots. It's probably cost prohibitive, but it was innovative.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
never seen it before.
So I'll just hopefully end by saying Memo would support anything that we can do to help with the recycling idea, but we can't be obligated to staff anything. So we have so much trouble getting volunteers
Right.
for all the other things relative to Memo, safety and whatnot. So I would just say that I would hope that anything that you end up coming up with doesn't result in Memo being obligated to man those things.
At least speaking personally, Russ, Memo, ever since I've lived in this town, has done a great job of putting on Medfield Day, and I understand that's probably helpful for the businesses in Medfield, but it's also hugely helpful for the town. So speaking personally, I have no desire to place a burden on the people that are basically sponsoring Memo beyond the willingness of them to volunteer their time right now as it is. I appreciate the open-mindedness about looking at doing things, certainly, and that makes sense to me too, because most people here in town, I think, are actually sympathetic to environmental practices that are positive. So I don't think any of us are in a major opposition camp to trying to do the right thing, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't punish those who volunteer to do good things. Okay, so we will, I guess, look at adding that policy to our future licenses. That's easy enough to do. It sounds like we're close to having a reasonable plan for this year's Medfield Day that may be a little more focused on bottles and things like that, but at least we'll get that part straight. We're going to learn something from that and have a better idea of how far we can push things in the future.
Perfect.
Great. First item of our 40-item agenda is now done.
Thank you.
Yet I never figured out whether I can recycle an orange juice carton, for God's sake. Is it cardboard? Is it trash?
It's coated.
Yeah. I am pretty,
Let me know when it's not.
I'm pretty sure all the wine bottles, no matter the
Well, I
color,
was gonna suggest
those are
perhaps
okay.
part of that,
Yeah.
you start thinking about maybe a draft beer
Right,
requirement,
right.
right? So you don't have all those cans.
Yeah, although Mo's got me confused now with the pizza box thing, because for the longest time, I thought you couldn't recycle pizza boxes. And in the last year or year and a half, I read an article, I think from one of our own organizations, that said, no, pizza boxes are just fine. And it really made no sense to me, because I would always dump all the crumbs out in the grass, but it never made any sense to me that this big piece of cardboard couldn't be recycled when some of these other things could, so.
Cut out the really heavy grease.
Yeah. And if you keep the little paper there, there's not even that. You just throw the paper away. Anyway, all right, let's move on.
That's where you got the pizza from.
So we're gonna go to the contract, you wanna go to the contracts? Or-
No, first we're gonna do the public hearing for the
So
solicitor
we are gonna do
licenses.
that,
Yep,
okay.
We'll do that first.
So, second item is a continued public hearing for the following solicitor license applications, Power Home Remodeling, Glen Cat.
So we have not been able to reach Glenn Cat since we continued the hearing at our last meeting, so I'm going to request that you close the public hearing without prejudice, and he can
Okay.
come in and reapply if he's interested at a later date.
Close and then deny without prejudice.
Wait, hold on. A couple of comments that came in on the last, thank you, it's sitting here right
Yeah,
there.
they seemed, I'm not so sure if the person typing them knew that they were public comments when they were commenting, so that's why I didn't draw attention to them.
I think they were saying before we went, so.
Yeah.
Oh, the last one says agree with Gus, that's all I need to see. They're in agreement with Gus, that's good. Okay, excellent. So we need a motion to deny without prejudice and close, no,
Well,
close the
first,
public
close
hearing
the
and then
public hearing,
deny.
then motion to deny without prejudice.
That's right, okay. So, could we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Can I now have a motion to deny the solicitor license application without prejudice?
So moved.
Based on their failure to prosecute.
Based on their failure to
Prosecute it.
prosecute
The application.
not just pursue, prosecute,
that's
to
fine, too.
prosecute it. Based on,
Failure to show up.
based on failure to show up actually works for me, but based on the applicant's failure to prosecute the application.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, closed, and denied without prejudice. Due to failure to prosecute the application.
We null prost them.
Hold on. Usually I could just write, okay. Next, Director of Public Works, Maurice Goulet, to discuss the current drought status and continued water conservation measures.
Hello again.
Hey, Bob.
So just want to kind of give you a timeline of things that have transpired over the course of the year with our drought status and reasons, what has happened, what we've done, what to expect. So first thing, back in early May, late April, we had an unfortunate incident where pump and motor of our major well had gone down. That spurred with the Water and Sewer Board and a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to put on a water restriction, which was a Tier 4. The Tier 4 was non-essential watering, outdoor watering was prohibited with handheld hose watering only. The only reason why we had to do that is because right now we're doing the water treatment plant. Wells 3R and 4 are going to be the reason why we're doing the plant. For one of the reasons is for redundancy. If we had that redundancy all set, which will be in February, that's when it's scheduled to be completed, we wouldn't have had this issue. But unfortunately, we did just happen to be at a bad time. But the well was repaired, but at the same time, the state declared a significant drought for this area. We're in the southeast region under Mass DEP. So the town, we usually go with the recommendation from the state. The recommendation was to be the same tier level that we have in place was a Tier 4, was handheld hose watering only. Since then, we went from significant drought to critical drought from the task force. They meet periodically to kind of reevaluate the state's condition. Our southeast region went to critical stages where we went to a tier 5, and that's where we are right now, is a tier 5. September 8th, the drought, the task force had met again, and they created our southeast region right here. We're right on the edge. The southeast region is now a significant drought again, from critical to significant. So we did make improvements from the last precipitation events, but it still doesn't solve our problem of drought. If you see...
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
on the map? So significant on the map says level 2 significant drought, but
Correct.
you're saying that's tier 3?
Tier 4 in our language here in local town.
So a level 2 significant drought is a tier 4 what?
Tier 4
Restriction?
water restriction for our local,
Bylaw.
yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Because we have 5 tiers.
I know, that's why I couldn't find 5 on the legend.
Right.
So I was trying to understand. Okay,
So this is
Got
levels for the state, tiers for the local town.
got it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So with the critical and emergency, if it ever went to critical and emergency, we would go to a tier 5. That's our highest level here. And that would be no outdoor watering whatsoever. So that's where we stand today. But with this significant, going back to significant drought levels, which is an improvement, even though it's still significant, we would recommend going back to a tier 4 like we did in the past, which is handheld hose watering only. Now, the issue with the drought is that the water table, it's not that we don't have the infrastructure to get the water to the residents, it's where the water table is so low, and that's why they classify these droughts. And with people watering, it could lower that level even more, where our wells could be trying to pump out air and sludge and everything else because the water table is so low. We're not at that stage right now, so it has made some improvements, but we're still in a drought situation. With the rain we had today, it's going to help a little bit, but it's still not going to solve. I don't see this ending very soon, maybe into mid-October to November, depending on what we get for precipitation. But there is some confusion from the state's guidance. The state had sent out guidance about what's allowable during, or what may be allowed during water restriction, mandatory water restrictions, what's not allowed. It's for health and safety for the most part, for food production if it's necessary to have water. But outdoor watering, it talks about September and April putting in new lawns and may be allowed to be watered. But I believe that's the interpretation that the town, at the town's discretion, if it's allowable, if we have, it's hard to give everybody permission to water when everybody who's trying to conserve water is doing the right thing, have a lot of brown lawns, and give the town a lot of credit. I mean, if you go around, there's a lot of brown lawns, and there's some that are green lawns. Some are from private wells, and some are from people that ignore the restriction. So, but you get that everywhere. I've talked to a lot of my peers in other cities and towns, and they go through the same thing. It's just the whole system is the same for each and every town. So, but that's where we are right now, is a significant level 2 from the state, which is a tier 4 for the local town, and that's where we reside right
So
now.
tier 4 goes back to people can hand water after 5 and before 9.
Correct. If you have, still have gardens that are growing still, or used to have areas that you handheld hose, but the total irrigation, that's what really is the problem for the water table.
Questions, comments?
So comments, I know we received a few emails today from citizens, certainly concerned. There's one here that, is there a point person or committee in Medfield designated and empowered to enforce water restrictions and bans? How are we doing that right now? Since we know we have fines.
So for water restrictions and bans, that's, it's usually if it's not DEP already, I should mention that during water restrictions, we go by the stream flow of the Charles River. but the drought declarations from the state supersede those stream flow conditions. So once we hit a certain stream flow of the Charles River, we have to put on a restriction. But the normal process is to go through the Water and Sewer Board, explain the situation. They recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we put on a certain restriction at the time, whether it's odd even, whether it's 1 day per week or no watering at all. And then the Board of Selectmen votes to accept the recommendation or not. So that's the process for water restrictions and bans.
And then enforcement.
So enforcement, as far as enforcement, we go around, so this is a situation where we try to educate the people that are watering during a drought. First, we try to get the word out that there's a drought happening. It's in the news, it's on the website, we have signage. Another thing we're trying to do is be thoughtful about what signage we're gonna bring in, because we wanna put A-frame sandwich boards in the center of town and along the islands so that people can see that. We don't want it to be too many words on there that people are gonna have to read while they're driving, but understand that they need to visit the website to understand what the tiers mean. We can put a little blurb on each one, but again, we don't want it to be a whole book that people are reading. We do have these big, old water ban signs that we have on the outskirts of town, but we're trying to be thinking of what is the best solution for these signs, what's legible, what's understandable. So we're taking our time. We just don't want to just buy things and throw it in there and buy it all over again. But as far as enforcement, we do send out information to residents that are watering. Then it becomes warnings and then violations. We have sent out many violations and to this point, so.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and when a violation goes out, what's the consequence of that?
Well, they have it's the first offense, the warning, then the first offense is $100, the second offense is $200, the third offense and everything after that will be $300.
So how much money has the town collected on all the violations we've sent out this year?
Right now, I believe only 7 have paid.
So
7.
what are we gonna do, and I'm just trying to understand this, I'm not hammering you. What do we do with all the ones that haven't?
Mark, can you help me out with that one?
Unfortunately, they're not self-enforcing, and the state, in the terms of the legislature, has not given us the tools to work with bylaws enforcement generally. So what you have to actually do is file a criminal complaint in the application for a criminal complaint in the district court.
You can't just put a lien on the property?
No, that's the problem. These are not included. And ironically, back at the time of the Municipal Modernization Act in 2016, Department of Revenue actually had proposed language that would have allowed unpaid fines at the local level to be liened, and the legislature in their wisdom scrubbed it from the legislation. It didn't go through. So we're back where we started. Myself, my colleagues, we continually bring this up, but unless and until the legislature chooses to do that, the fallback is to go to the district court, which is very inconvenient at the local level. The court frankly doesn't want to be bothered with any kind of local bylaw enforcement, let alone masses of water things. So it is what it is. You're really relying upon shaming people, if you will, to do the right thing, because their neighbors are, and their people and everybody else is, and then educating, whatever you want to call it, to convince them to do it voluntarily because it's the right thing to do.
We do want to start, an education program on water conservation, what it does to our system. A lot of people don't know that, when people are overwatering, especially with irrigation, they're overwatering their lawns. You don't need that much water to have a healthy lawn. But when everybody's watering at the same time, it depletes the levels in our storage tanks. And when you deplete the levels in the storage tanks, you run the risk of fire suppression, water for fire suppression, for head pressure from these for, you'll get trickles in your system rather than getting full pressure for water. It does, reduce drinking water as well. So it's a choice between having a, overwatered green lawn or, having, proper quality water in your system.
So in my view,
Yep.
and this would apply to bylaws with the dog walking bylaws, it applies to these bylaws. If we have bylaws that when we write violations, we are incapable of enforcing, my own view is we should not write any violations at all, because every violation this town writes that says you're gonna do this and you're fined, and somebody says, screw you, you can't do anything to me, undercuts the legitimacy of what we're doing as a town. If shaming is the way to go, or actually, first, education is the way to go. People who won't be educated, or are educated and don't care, I think you're right, Mark, shaming is the way to go. So next is my question. Can the town put up a public map or a public listing of all residents who have who are basically in violation, so that it's out there in the public for their neighbors and everybody else to see? Because we don't have a way to enforce the fines. I would rather not be taken for a fool to say, oh, well, we're gonna, there's 7 people that actually owned up and took responsibility. All the rest basically said, these laws don't mean, these rules don't mean anything, you just ignore them and do what you want. Then let's go full bore shaming, unless there's a reason why we can't do that.
Well, I think too, the citations that we send out, the people that do pay them, they rather pay the small fines rather than lose their lawn and pay more money to redo their lawn. But
Yeah.
again, it's, this year was a particularly very difficult year. It started because of our well being down. It wasn't, if it started, the declarations would have started later on in the season. We might not have had as much stress, and now we're coming back a little bit. So it was unfortunate, but in the future, with the new water treatment plant, we're gonna be in better shape.
We need to get the UU Church to put the stockades back out where they were back in the 1600s, then we could.
My suggestion, frankly, particularly with the new legislative session due to start, would be to lobby the legislators to put the language, the remedial language in that allows us to have some teeth for these. And this is a perfect example of public health and safety calling out for this need.
I mean, it may be, and I agree with you, Mark, that's a better way to go, but if we aren't able to do that, I personally think it's a mistake for us to pretend like we have enforceable authority that we actually don't have. For whatever reason, we don't have it. I'm not necessarily trying to put people's pictures up on the post office wall, but having something on the website that talks about, that lists unpaid violations, just keeps a continuing, registry of the status of violations by name, address, and this payment status. Once it's paid, it goes away. Putting it up on the website somewhere so that anybody that's interested that wants to see who is not on board with this can see who's, and that would go from dog licenses to, to the whole 9 yards. Put it up there.
But you have to give kudos to the people that have, the majority of the townspeople have done a tremendous job of, and it's too bad that we have,
I don't know
a
of
small
any
majority.
prohibition.
If there's no
Matter of
prohibition,
fact,
maybe we could look at
the
doing something like
process
that.
on real estate taxes, at some point, those end up being published.
My point is, all those good people in the town, I think they're the ones that are writing us the emails,
Sure.
and some of them are saying, yeah, I got neighbors that just say, screw it, we don't have to, we can ignore that, and so it's for their sake. If they are listening to this, or if they hear this, they understand why not much is happening, because we don't have the legal authority to do what it looks like we're able to do. I'd rather not.
There's a lot of frustration in the
Yeah.
town where,
getting
why should
bigger.
I do that if my neighbor's not doing that?
Well, and I
But
think one of the things that Mo and I have been working on is that when we get a complaint about that, by the time we get out there the next day, they may not be watering at the time that our staff is going by to see if
Yeah.
they're watering or not.
That's different.
And we just don't have enough staff. We had a couple of retirements this fall in the administrative office, that we just didn't have the staff to be able to put on the street to handle the
And
enforcements.
most people are doing it at 2 in the morning. If you're gonna do it right, you're gonna
Right.
do it like
To
between
go
2
around
and.
town, it takes us 3 guys, and we don't get through, we go through, and it takes them 3 hours each going through the whole town. We don't even get through the whole town.
Right,
And then when we're giving out citations, it's even longer,
right.
because they have to stop.
Right,
and-
so one of the things that I had talked a little bit with the chairman of Water and Sewer Board, with Bill Harvey, was looking at the new, I know we talked about last week, looking at a new rate model study for water and sewer, and one of those is a drought restriction tier, so that if you continue to water, there is, a much more exorbitant tier during a drought that we would put in place.
But here's the catch, I thought of that after we talked about that today, is that different
Some
than
people are
other
willing to
towns.
pay it.
Well, no, different. Some towns you actually have water strictly that there's a meter for watering your lawn, and then there's a meter for the rest of your water in your house. We don't have that in Medfield.
We
just
don't have
want-
residential
We don't
meters,
want-
we
yeah.
only
So
have
if I'm doing
commercial.
laundry during that tier 5, right, where that's still just day-to-day water,
Yeah.
I'm getting dinged during that.
I think that what we could look at is kind of go out and note and find out which properties are watering, and then see their usage for the tier structure.
Yeah, as long as there's a way to, I thought of that after we
You know,
talked
there's
today.
a,
that
you
there's a way to
wouldn't
buffer that.
penalize people for who are using their, their typical. It would be more.
Showers.
It's more going for people who are watering their lawns.
Okay.
So
As long as there's a way to try to differentiate that.
We did get a good question from Christian Donner online. He was saying, don't private wells lower the water table like everything? I thought, in years past, I always had heard private wells were not covered by the restrictions, but I could have sworn at the
So
start
they're
of this
not
year we
regulated
said
by
they are.
state or by towns.
They can be.
They can be, but they're
Can
not.
be.
And
can
we
put that as
should,
law.
we should regulate them.
Legally, they can be. The Attorney General gave an opinion years and years ago, but there wasn't the political will to put it into place at the state level. There's nothing to preclude it being done at the local level. In a local bylaw, we expressly exempt wells at the moment in private wells in our bylaw, which was modeled on Franklin, which did the same. But he's absolutely correct. Ultimately, the water's all coming from the same
Aquifers.
pool, if you will, the aquifer.
So that's something we could consider looking at the 2023 town meeting, mainly because we did it to Trinity for the LDA, that we said that they can do a well, but if we're on a tier 4, tier 5, they need to honor that. So I would think that should be across the board, whether it's the
Very
park,
simple,
whether it's
just
private.
take the language out that excludes private wells.
Okay.
Fairly simple fix.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
And
thanks.
you would have the second, the confirmation, because obviously it has to be approved by the AG's office. So you would know right up front whether they still consider it to be legally valid or not.
Okay.
So back to grass and lawns, Mo, as of now, because we're back to tier 4, new lawns can be watered or can't.
Well, that's a question, kind of that's a little bit on the edge there. With a tier 4, it's non-essential watering, outdoor watering is prohibited.
But is there a special provision for new lawns in September?
So, from the state guidance, it may be allowed for new lawns in April and September,
Okay.
okay? That's kind of a discretion of the town level, to say, okay, we recognize that, do we want to allow new lawns, but the lawns that are established can't water?
So the default right now is if the town doesn't positively say we do want to exempt new lawns, then new lawns are not exempted. And that's the current status right now because we haven't passed judgment one way or the other.
Correct.
And you don't sound like you're recommending that we should.
Well, I mean, it's, the state is still in a significant drought. They're not in like, everything's fine,
Mhm.
we're just gonna put that out there. I do feel that we're gonna have improvement in the near future. I would recommend that we hold off until we get better news in the near future, and then make another decision, whether we're still in the significant drought, and then make a decision whether or not that can still happen. It's still early for for new lawns, and a lot of people I know with their lawns, some of them have come back, some of them haven't. So a lot of people want to do the slice seeding. They want to do the thatching, get all the old grass out and put in,
Right.
reseed. So we want to be sensitive to that, but we also, we're on the conservative side as well.
So, next question, is it only September that's the exempted month, or does it bleed over into October?
It can go into October as well.
Okay, so if we delayed doing something now, and then we said it was okay late in September, it wouldn't be, yeah, you got a week to do it, and then we're back off again, it would.
So
they'd
the
be able to
task
go.
force will meet mid-September, so
Okay.
in another week or so, they're gonna come back with another task force meeting and see what the situation is. I don't see that them lifting this. It could go to a level 1, it could get improved, but we haven't had a tremendous amount of precipitation in this area, but it's the whole southeast region, so it goes all the way towards the Cape as well.
So is there communication to, like, so I use Natural Lawns, and I know they've been peppering me to come in and aerate and seed.
Yep.
They did it last year. We were in a situation where we couldn't water, so kind of wasted my money, right? And it's not their fault.
Right.
But are we communicating, or is the state communicating to these lawn services
So
that they
it's-
shouldn't be pushing it?
It's, every business wants to make money, and they've
Sure.
lost a lot of money over the course of the summer this year, but, a lot of them want you to water your lawn. They want you to do that. So, through the news, media, and everything else, it's kind of out there to show people, but again, the companies are out there to survive and to make a business.
Yeah, and I'm
So-
not knocking Natural Lawns at all. I think they're great.
No,
But I
I-
think it's tough because they'll call throughout the summer. They'd say, I'm coming through. I'm like, I can't water. If you're going to give me something I have to water, I'm not going to do it. And it's not that I don't want you to do your job, but if we don't say something, then we're going to have people using the water, and
I think we need to have better communication as well, more communication and more, educational materials out there that talk about water conservation and about, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and give them an idea of, of the seriousness that it does bring to it.
so making a recommendation, maybe I'm overstepping my boundaries here, but making a recommendation that if they're getting inquiries from your lawn service company, if you choose to do it, you're basically turning your nose to trying to conserve water in the town of Medfield, because they're gonna tell you you need to water X number of days, and for those first 7 to 10 days, if you don't do it, your $900 or $1,200 or $1,500 aerating and seed package just went out the window.
So what makes it difficult too is other cities and towns don't take the recommendation of the state. And they start allowing people, because they get too much pressure, and they start allowing people to water and everything else. It just hurts the whole area because you're fighting against that as well. Well, I live in such and such a town and we were able to water, and how come we can't do it here? So we really have to, I think, Pete, you had said it good, with an email to me about, creating a plan, trying to figure out what's the best course of action with all of our water restrictions and conservation efforts. And then, translate that to the community to get them the information they need.
So for anybody who was writing those emails or asking those questions, whether it was emails or Facebook, about can we water our new lawn now, or can we water our overseeded lawn now, which is sort of new, but not totally new, but it is new because it's grass seed. The answer right now is no, you can't, not in Medfield. That you'll be meeting in the middle of September to reassess. So there's
State will
at
be
least a
reassessing
possibility.
it, and I think maybe in another week or two that come back and discuss it, and, we don't want to wait too long because it's hard to establish a lawn. You don't want to do it in the spring. A lot of times you want to do it in the fall, so we understand that.
October's kind of late, unfortunately.
Right. So if we give, a couple weeks in September, if we can kind of talk about it another week or two and make a decision.
Global warming.
I'm good with that. Yeah, well, maybe global warming will help October, yeah. Yes.
If I could just make kind of a public service announcement, having some background in horticulture, there is grass seed and there is grass seed. You have choices now.
We're not
They
growing
have,
that kind of grass.
they have very hardy, drought-resistant grass that you can put in, that does not require the water that the traditional grasses do. It grows slowly, so you don't have to mow it as often. Years ago here, I lost an entire front lawn, and I seeded with that. and was very pleased with the results. And that was years ago, so they made improvements since then, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, tall fescue was the sort of the standard, but I was reading about one today that you only mow once a month in the summer. It grows so slowly, 10-inch roots. 270, how much was it? It was $25 for 5 pounds at Whole Foods Market. So can I ask my questions?
Sure. Oh, sorry.
So I think that our response this summer to the watering issues was lacked all kinds of equity. There were just too many people flaunting the requirement, and that's just not right for the citizens who are obeying it. So that I think we need to come up with a better plan for next year, and so that's my first hope that I can charge you with doing that. I think that the rates structure that Chris was mentioning, I had suggested that sometime during the summer too, that we change the rate structure so that it's confiscatory if people are watering their lawns during a drought when they're not supposed to. If they want to do that, we'll charge them the cost of a teacher, basically. It'll be so expensive that people won't do it.
So that would
And so
be
that
based-
gets around the
how would you- how
lien
would you-
issue. I think we also want to send I think we also want to get our state rep to change the whole lien issue so that we can have all of our bylaw fines just go on to, as a lien against the real estate. And then you have no problem collecting it, because eventually it's going to get sold, and it may be 10, 20, 30 years or whatever, but eventually the town will get the money.
Or the mortgagee makes you do it in the interim.
So I think that we need to pursue that strategy. In terms of getting reports, if that's part of our need, is to know who's doing it, and instead of having 3 of your people driving around for 3 hours at a morning, I think we maybe encourage the town to crowdsource it. You know, just set up a system where they can send in a photo, dated photo, and then you can follow up on the photos and get the homeowner a copy of the photo and say, you know, this is what was reported. Here's your fine, or whatever.
Yeah, you know, if we're going to do that though, Pete, then the education piece has to be big,
Right.
because actually what ought to be happening is neighbors ought to be able to talk to neighbors, not sit there and rat out neighbors.
Well, in my
You know,
experience, I was
unless
going to
they're-
say that it comes a little bit contentious with neighbors because they're being turned in. They're you know they find out that they're being turned in and everything, and relations. I mean, first they're not supposed to be doing it anyways, but I think it's you know, people want to be anonymous. They want to be.
Oh, yeah, you'd set it up anonymously so that you would just get an anonymous photo, and then you would just use that photo with the homeowner. So crowdsource the reporting, and then I don't know what to do about the new lawns. I mean, I have to basically replace 1/3 of my lawn to 1/2 of my lawn.
Like I said, I don't want to wait too long, but give it one more week to see what the task
Yeah.
force comes up with. Just because if that's the case, then, you know, we've been in a significant drought most of the year, and we have not allowed the watering to take place, and everybody's been abiding by that. So people that aren't putting in a new lawn, are they able to water as well? That just defeats the whole purpose right now.
Yeah, I know. It's a
It's not-
dilemma at the moment,
It is,
so.
it's not, I mean, I feel for all the residents that have the lawns that need to be replaced or need to be seeded. So that's why I say.
Ready to
maybe-
go. I bought up all the grass seed, tall fescue down at Walmart, so don't go there for your grass seed now. So that's my
Okay.
thoughts. Somehow we need a more equitable system next summer.
Unless we don't have a drought. Okay, that's good. Is there another?
No, right in front of you. Right in front of you. No, in the audience.
Oh. Why do you keep pointing there? It's like, no, it says, no open questions. Take it away. You got it. You're up.
Nancy Bray, I'm the Bloom Brigade manager for the Medfield Garden Club. We maintain all the beautification sites.
Thanks.
When we went to Tier 5, we advised the crew that we were no longer able to water. However, when there was a statement that was both on the patch and also on the town website that said that new plantings, not only for lawns, but new plantings could be watered for the month of September. Based on that information, I advised the Girl Scouts to go ahead with their Silver Award plan to plant a tree at the library. And I donated a tree gator bag for that purpose, but the tree really needs, it was a $300 tree that was planted by the Girl Scouts, and they're going to lose it if we can't water it. So I just want clarification that they will be able to continue to maintain that bag being filled to be able to sustain that tree.
Under a tier 4, that's like a handheld hose watering. It's not an irrigation where it's constantly on. So that with a water bag with, intermittent watering for just a tree is not considered an irrigation of a full irrigation system.
Right, but that's tier 4. We're in tier 5 right now.
That's what I'm saying is that we were in tier 5 with the critical. Now we went up to significant, which we're going to be changing to a tier 4. But I wanted to make sure it was okay with the selectmen before we went ahead and did that.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All
it's
righty.
clearly okay with the selectmen that you go to tier 4. We understand that tier 4, when we go to tier 4, that does not open up new lawns, at least for another week or two.
Yeah.
But it would certainly allow for what I just heard is hand watering of a tree with no problem and no issues. And thank you and the Garden Club for
Thank
everything
you.
you've done all the years.
And the Girl Scouts.
And the Girl Scouts, yes. Yes. Thank you.
I know, it's been a long time coming.
What kind of tree did they plant? What kind of tree did they plant?
They planted a Crucian dogwood tree, which replaced a tree that in the garden club entrance garden there that we lost last spring and had to be cut down.
Oh,
So it was a great addition and very happy to have that support from the Girl Scouts.
the Girl Scouts did cherry trees in front of the post office last year.
So if they lose this tree, I would recommend a saguaro cactus the next time around.
Or a native dog.
It's a- Jessica, what do you got?
So
Yeah,
speaking
microphone
to,
somewhere, you got it, the Bill microphone there. Yes.
So I just have a quick comment. First of all, I don't like to think that I've lost a lawn. I've gotten a native garden at this point. But I do wonder if there is a way to be kind of more proactive and a little bit more carrot rather than stick. We're kind of stuck with people who may be flaunting the water prohibitions right now, but in the future, if we were able to make things easier for people, for new build, for people who are putting in lawns, to highly encourage or educate landscapers and builders about drought-resistant lawns, things like mini clover, things like your fescue, things like using Pennsylvania sedge in places in which it's not necessarily necessary to have turf. If there are education plans, and I don't know particularly if there is grant money out there, and I can see this happening through Medfield Sustainable or whomever, talking really about how we're not going to get any less hot over the next 50, 100 years, and how do we as a town kind of proactively address this need that we have for water, for residential watering, which really is such a drain on our water resources. How do we kind of proactively educate people around that, and how do we put that into our building plans and our zoning? And it's simply a suggestion right now. Thank you. Anyone? Just give it to you.
We are working with, we have a stormwater grant that we're doing best management practices and doing projects in small different areas using stormwater to, for gardens and things like that. Xeriscape gardens are getting more and more popular where they're using less water. They're attractive. They're plants and that can be used in a relatively good garden with minimal water use. So we are getting to that part of it as well. So
Okay, I think we've beaten that one to death.
All right,
We're
no more
done?
red
done.
hands down there, we're good.
No more. Okay, no more hands up. No more questions. We're going to jump to contracts, I think.
Yes, Mo has 2 contracts
Okay,
on
we
the.
have 2 contracts. Mo,
one of them is our annual stormwater compliance contract. We have a company that we deal with that keeps us in compliance with our stormwater management that we're required every year to comply with, phosphorus plans, all different kinds of quarterly reports, and whether it's, what do you got there, Mark?
Some kind of little bug.
We use Ginnivan Group for our stormwater management. We do a lot of things like catch basin cleaning, street sweeping. We do outfall sampling, wet and dry sampling, everything to comply with the state regulations for our stormwater management permit. And they are our engineer to assist us with that.
Okay, questions?
Honestly, no. I chatted briefly with Christine early this afternoon, and I think it's very thorough.
Pete, any questions?
No questions, no.
I would note for people listening, the Ginnivan Group contract runs from the 6th of September to the 30th of August of 2023. Total value, $39,700. And I didn't have any questions on that one, Mo, so
It's good.
entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That's first one.
The next one is with the environmental partners. They're very knowledgeable of our system. One of our capital items with the Water and Sewer Board for this past year that was approved at town meeting was to have a water system hydraulic model created with a update to our water master plan. Basically, we're looking at seeing what the what our infrastructure looks like, what needs to be done, what needs to be planned for improvements within the system over a course of, 15, 20 years. And I think, we were running on a capital program that was kind of antiquated, and we want to make sure that we're making, especially with development and everything else, we're making, better decisions on what needs to be improved and when. So this is a start to help us in that direction.
Questions?
No, again, read through it. It's quite, it's interesting stuff. I do have one quick question. You know the tour you guys went on a couple weeks ago? Was that anything related to this? It was either the EPA or you gave a tour?
No, that was the wastewater treatment plant.
Oh, wastewater, okay, all right. No, good, thank you.
Questions, Pete?
No.
I have questions on this one. And these are sort of contract management questions. They're not scope. This is again, for the public, this is running from the 2nd of September 22 to the 30th of June 23. It's a $95,500 lump sum fee. So this is a fixed price contract. The town contract says that they will be billing us on a monthly basis. And I'm not sure what that actually means. So we have a contract that's running for the period of performance that they based was, I had it written down here, the first task, 4.5 months, second task, 2 months. So it's actually 6.5 months of actual performance, although the contract period is longer. Usually in a lump sum contract, there's some sort of maybe an upfront payment, maybe a payment at completion of task 1, another payment at task 2. They're doing it on a monthly basis. On what basis? What will they bill, and on what basis will they determine that?
I'll have to talk to the contractor, but usually they'll whatever progress they make at that time, they'll bill for that.
But they're not giving us rates, which they shouldn't in a lump sum contract, so I don't know what that actually means. They're gonna bill what they feel like billing, is what I'm hearing. And ordinarily in a lump sum, in a fixed price contract, we would be holding back, and this is not a comment about environmental partners, this is contract management.
Yep.
We would be holding back some significant portion of that total $100,000 total for accepted completion of both tasks. So I'm not grinding an axe because of them. I'm just talking about basic contract management says there ought to be a schedule for payment here, and there ought to be some final payment after completion of all the work has been determined to be satisfactory. I don't see any of this. I just kind of see we're billing monthly, and you're just going to pay it, and I don't know what the basis for those bills will be. Looks to me like the basis of the bill, if we just picked an arbitrary number, they said we're going to bill you $10,000 a month, I would say, okay, and that's, if we did that, and it's about $100,000 contract, and this is really only an 8-month contract in terms of period performance, that would leave that last bit for the final thing. But right now, this contract's got a big hole in it, as I see it, as far as terms go. Mark?
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the standard language in the contract says that they'll be compensated for the work performed.
But on what
Billed
basis?
on a monthly basis, but,
What's their rate? What's the?
well, I mean, it's a prorating of the overall job. I mean, this is a consultant contract, so there's more flexibility than if you actually were talking about building something or what have you, which you said would make
Well,
absolute
they are,
sense.
so that gets to my second question, because they actually are building something. They're not building a building, but they're building a model. So my next question was, there was an exclusion on task 1.5, coordinating, task 1, exclusions and assumptions. They exclude furnishing model software, licenses, and/or training town personnel in utilizing the hydraulic model software is not included in the scope of work, but can be added at the town's request. So my question, so what I'm getting at is they're developing a $100,000 model, and as I would see it, they should be providing a priced option for us to hire them. Unless you know up front, we have absolutely no intention of running this model, and we intend to rely on environmental partners for the foreseeable future to operate this model for us on an unspecified continuing contract. It seems to me there should be a priced option here for what they would be willing to do. Now, that option would have some pre-specified amount of training, so there'd be an assumption about training not to exceed X hours, days, weeks, whatever it is. But I'm just looking at this and saying, this thing has and again, there's just no comment about environmental partners. It's the contract setup itself leaves us widely vulnerable, both in terms of cash flow, in terms of what we're paying for, and in terms of being hostage to having paid $100,000 for a model that we can't operate, that presumably only they will be able to operate. So we're locked into a follow-on contract with them, and it seems to me that to keep that all where we have any leverage at all, that should have been a priced option.
Okay. I can discuss this with them and see if they can rewrite it and for the next.
I will, if either of you have a difference of opinion, or Mark, if I'm being just
No,
too
I think-
hard-nosed here.
I think that's a good idea, Gus.
Yeah, I think it's
it
Not
makes
goes
sense
to the
get more
details and-
information.
Okay.
There's no downside.
So, and again, there's no comment about these guys.
Right.
This is just basic structure of a contract.
Well, we do
This is
have an
what-
ongoing relationship
Yeah,
with that
yeah.
firm.
Right.
So I'm not
And
I'm not going after them, I'm going after what I think is
We probably
weaknesses.
don't want to be trained in this, it's probably a little convoluted for them to do it, but I do get your
Yeah.
point, I will.
There's a couple things that go with that. If they know they're on it, they have a priced option to train, that could possibly influence the design of their user interface, because if they realize maybe we have to transfer this thing, as opposed to the thing that I've got two guys in the office that know how to do this thing that they did for their own interface. I'm trying to get performance, and I'm trying to get leverage on pricing going forward, just because I don't ever like it when I'm in a contract situation where I've got no leverage.
Right.
And that seems to be setting that up here, so maybe we should, is there any problem with it deferring on this from a timing standpoint?
Just looking to try to get it in for town meeting for the capital, but,
Okay,
so I just wanted to make sure that we get it.
so I'm happy to, if we can sort this out, I'm happy to take it up again the next meeting, it's not, okay.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Mo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mo probably wishes I'd just ask him those little nitty-gritty questions. Okay. Let's see, next item we have is, back up. School committee application for a new elementary school building project. Potential vote to accept the application. Anna Mae has submitted a revised application. I listened. Oh, that's, well, if you prefer, you can just have the microphone, if that's easier. I sat through last night, so just listened last night, so I got a sense of what those changes. That was, yeah, no, that was good. It was a good discussion. That was a good meeting. So if you have any remarks?
Yes, of course. So I'd like to think about that waiting period as an opportunity, and that we took that opportunity to seek feedback from the community versus just waiting and hoping that they were going to go online and find it. So I thought that was a good step forward. Again, I want to reiterate that we really want to start this new process on a new footing and find opportunities to connect with the community in different ways. So we got over 100 responses, just over 100 responses that we're mostly grateful for, and some were related to specific school committee purview needs, and others were not. However, I thought the feedback was very helpful overall. I've shared that with you, and I've shared it with Scott, and I just think in moving forward, just knowing some of the sentiments, I think there needs to be more work in getting feedback, but I thought this was a good start. I do, and I know some of you were tuned in last night, but I want to reiterate that we are not proposing another Wheelock project. We are not. Okay.
In general, the committee, just because we want to build a school, we want to build a school that is achievable. We want to put forward our best proposal for the education of our children, and then work with the SBC to allow those town citizens to assess the best thing for the town together.
Yes. And just one other thing before we have, you guys want to go over the letter, is, as I said, grateful for the majority of the feedback, but I'm a little disheartened with some of the tone and the language towards school committees, towards our superintendent, towards private citizens. I'm really hoping that we can move forward working together. We're neighbors, you know. When I sent out the note to people thanking them for their feedback, it was intentional that I said, dear Medfield neighbors, we are all neighbors. So for us to speak to each other in that way, I find unproductive. And so I really hope that this new process, we can shed some of the toxicity that happened the last time and really move forward in a more positive, constructive, collaborative, transparent fashion. Thank you.
So, I think I have some questions and comments about having watched last night, having seen this, that will absolutely not influence my decision and willingness to sign or to vote to accept this application in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
So there's some things I'd like to talk about. I'm trying to think, should we talk about that before we accept, or is it after we accept? So that's just me.
Well, I mean, it makes
Put that out
sense
on
to
the
talk
table.
about it before, because
Okay.
if there's any comment like, you know, we could change it, we should change that, well, we just accepted something we're already changing, which is kind of
Yeah,
silly.
none of my comments will have any editorial requirements whatsoever. This letter is fine by me, and I'm prepared to accept it as it's been submitted. But I do have comments.
Sure.
So if that's the case, then let's start with you, comments, questions?
Yeah, so to quote you from 2 weeks ago, new beginnings, right, a new start, couldn't agree more. And I think that giving that 2-week window, you saw roughly 100 citizens feel like, okay, I had a chance to speak up. And I used this analogy when I was a sales manager, you know, you can stand in a circle, and a circle's 360 degrees, and everyone's gonna have a different angle on it, right? I know there was a request for, give us some insight on, you know, what could we be doing, what's best for the students, right? But you got people chiming in on location and whatever. But the big thing to me was, and I got personal emails saying, thank you for at least giving us a chance to say something at the start, right? So we're all just listening. No one's jumping the gun. I think there were a lot of requests that came in, and I know there's a person that reached out to you this past Sunday I've spoken with. There's definitely a concern, and I'm going to put this out there just because I'd like to understand why we're not potentially saying, you know, most of our schools right now average, I'm going to round up and say 400 students. So when I read this and I hear the thought, right, again, just a thought, nothing's engraved in stone, that we might merge some buildings down the road if things go up, go down. But I'd like to know from an education standpoint, is there a number that we just don't want to cross? That 400 today, 500 is starting to get a little uncomfortable, but you start crossing 6, 7, or 8, that's large. And I'll give you my background. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to Ramapo High School. Our graduating class was huge, right? I mean, I remember walking around Medfield High School when I first moved here. It was a square. There were no staircases. There was no nothing. So I chuckled. I'm like, okay, I get small schools. And so I also see the difference in the intensity of walking into a high school that has, I don't know, I think we had like 1,400 students, and you walk into a high school that has 800 altogether. So you or not even one of our high school, does our high school have roughly about 800? So as we look at especially the K through 5, is there a number? Have you guys talked amongst yourself as to where you really wouldn't want to cross?
We have not had that discussion as of yet, but last night we talked a little bit about it. We still have a lot of work to do.
Okay.
You know, we have to do some more due diligence, some more data analysis, so that came loud and clear in the feedback, so we realize we have work to do.
And the only reason I ask it is, this is the application, which starts the process to get the committee
Correct.
going. This is literally, I consider this almost like light number 2 pencil, right? Because nothing is engraved in permanent marker. So if that's the case, then this is just a launching platform. And it's really going to be up to the 12 citizens that start to talk about what we might want to do or might not want to do, and what are things that are acceptable. Because when I think about it, this is a small town. When my family moved here from Wyckoff, New Jersey to Medfield, really small town, and the idea of these charming small schools, and where I moved from, we had the neighborhood schools. So you wanted to go to Lincoln or you wanted to go to Sycamore. You didn't want to be the family that moved in and went to 2 other schools. So to me, neighborhood schools can be very divisive, because you either want to be on the right side of town or you don't want to be on the wrong side of town. Here, I love the fact that now all 2nd graders go together, all 5th graders go together. So we do drive a community. So those are just things that, as the 12 citizens come together, this is a talking point, but it just starts a conversation. It doesn't end it at any point.
Correct. I agree.
Let me just take a quick peek at my notes. But last night's meeting, I can't say enough. I thank you for making it so that those of us on Zoom, if we wanted to chime in, we could, right? That to me goes right to your statement. New beginnings, new start. Right, the document, though I'm not gonna lie, I'm not familiar with going through the school website. It's a lot of clicks to get to the document, right? But it was there, huge. And so those are the things, those are the baby steps that every time you guys have a meeting, if you continue to go back to, we're going to show you that we're gonna be transparent, we're gonna show you there is no agenda, that this just nip all of that ugly stuff from before, leave it in the rearview mirror, and move forward with the united community, so that when the 12 citizens are sitting around the table, they are representing all the different angles of Medfield, and we are getting that 95% support, and not the, hedging right on that 67.5. Which, I'm gonna say one more thing, you can cut me off if you don't want me to say this. But, and don't say that in any other way, maybe you don't want me to go there right
I've
now.
never had the
but-
nerve to try to cut my,
But in terms of the MSBA and where we are, and kind of just at the beginning, and I know, Jeff, you're here, so I would welcome your comment to what I'm about to say regarding the MSBA, and potentially having, and when I had that meeting with Jack, and we talked about where they would be in a timeline to bring a community into a program, and what they'll be looking for to not accept. Would it be so bad? Because I think it reflects well on Medfield if we say to the state, we don't want you to waste a nanosecond on us. If we're not ready right now, maybe we pull our application. Not that we don't want to get it back in next year, but if they're starting to spend time, money, and energy to sort out schools, I don't believe we're near a point to have them come and do any evaluation, because we're just starting to launch, and we're just starting to bring the community together. And I know that the divisiveness did not help our cause, and if we can't prove that we're becoming united, that may hurt our chance. And I don't want them to think that we don't have respect for the time, money, and energy it takes when they start looking at different towns, that we say, you know what, this might not be ready. We don't want to waste your time. Out of respect, we'll back out now, but it doesn't mean you're not going to see us again in April. It's just food for thought. I don't know, Jeff, if you have a comment to that.
Can we go up here?
Yeah, sure.
Whichever
Great,
is,
thank
yeah,
you.
that's good. I think the lighting's better over there.
Then I'm moving up there.
Yeah, so just my initial reaction to that, I think that if we were going to be in the program, I would have heard already.
Last time we heard in August, and we haven't heard anything yet, so they could be behind their assessments, I'm not sure, but I think it's unlikely that they'll get us right back in there based on the fact that we did have the field vote in November. But I think it was, you know, I've said this before, I think it made sense to at least, you know, apply and see if they would let us, you know, back into the program, but I doubt, for a number of factors, not just the fact that it failed, that we'll be back in.
But do you think it plays out, because knowing that, you know, our name is on a list, and
Mhm.
someone's gonna have to spend some time, money, and energy to evaluate yay or nay. Now, maybe it's a
But
quick.
they've already done that.
Okay, so if they've done
So-
that.
No, I mean, they've done that when they let us in the last time, so it's not like they're spending an inordinate amount of time with us. They know we need a new school. They let us in the program before because we needed a new school.
Right, and if I interpreted what I was being coached on that day is, but they still need to then figure out who's in and who's out,
Right.
right? So there will be some time spent when we could graciously say, don't spend any time in Medfield in 2022, but trust me, if it's meant to be, we're gonna be back next year.
Yeah.
But if we leave ourselves there and they spend time on us, and we know it's not time well spent, because we're still trying to get our ducks in a row, I'm just trying to take it
No,
from.
I hear you. I just think that conversation probably would have happened in May. You know, I think if we were having this conversation in May and we were gonna do that, I think all that's already taken place. They know
Right, as
exactly
long-
what they're gonna ask in right now.
As long as it doesn't play out that they come back and say, you guys, if you weren't really ready, you could have pulled yourself out. Because that's us being proactive and respecting them, versus waiting for them to then come and say, we spent some time, we evaluated. Maybe what you're saying is they've already done it and just haven't sent the letter out, but.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding and the meetings I've had and conversations I've had with Jack too, you know, a lot of it is based on who applies for that particular year. Like, for instance, if there are 7 or 8 high schools that applied, or 10 high schools, they take all the money. So you have a very low number of elementary and middle that will get in because high schools are so expensive now. So I guess, I don't know who applied this year, I don't know what it looks like, but a lot of that depends on
Right.
the amount of high schools, because they really take up most of the cash.
Okay, just food for
No, I
thought.
hear you. I mean, I don't think that, in my conversations with them, I don't think that impacts it at all.
Okay,
They want us to apply. They want as many people in there as they can get, so. But I think, given the circumstances and kind of their experience with Medfield the last time, I'm not sure they're excited to get us right back in there.
right, and I don't disagree with that. I think we need to show a united front. We've got a group of citizens from all angles and all ages supporting it and not having what we experience, so,
Sure.
okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Is there anything else you want me to say up here?
No, I guess, just to that point, Jeff, the way I looked at that, just as a contrast, was that we don't really have to pull it, because it seemed to me, I assumed there was some advantage to be able to say, listen, we've had this application in the list for 4 years, so as opposed to simply showing up with the first year with an updated one, I just sort of assumed that maybe having had an application sitting in the queue, even though you're up front, you know, you don't sit there and, they probably figured out where we're at and knew not to waste much time. I thought the SOI, which primarily makes the case that the existing school is not adequate, so it's not making a case for what the new school should be, it's making a case for the existing school. As you got me thinking about it, I said, well, if we were a couple of years into it, we might have to update the SOI, because we'd have more bad things to say about the existing school. But having the application in there and being in the queue for a couple of years, I assumed wasn't automatically a bad thing. What seemed to me would be worse would be for us to get our act together and then start the clock on the MSBA, because there'd be no guarantee that you'd get there the
Decision
first
makers
year.
know, they did that vetting, you know, a couple of years ago, so they know we need a new school, so I don't think they spent a lot of time
Yeah.
on our application. It was more to see what types of schools, where they were from, what the needs were, and to see whether, if there were other districts or other schools that needed to be built before Dale Street School. That's kind of how they do it.
That's it. Pete?
So my first issue had to do with the new letter. As I read through it, I didn't really notice any changes. Were there actually substantive changes in it?
I was gonna say it took a while.
Not major changes. You know, we replaced proposal with application. We,
Got rid
Got
of the
rid of the
bold.
bolding.
yeah, exactly. I
also had, I think, specific discussions about.
The conversations were, yeah, the conversations were
And just
good.
use the microphone. I'm getting comments that they can't hear you.
Yes, so we had substantial, you know, consideration. So For the first bullet, I would say that, we took out I think the last part of the last sentence in the original letter.
Okay.
The second, see, I need those bullets to know what this was about. The second one, the unified setting, we had a very extensive conversation about that and how a lot of the feedback read that as we want a large school, another Wheelock essentially, and we discussed that that is in fact not the point. So we tweaked that section a little bit. The third bullet, no, we did not make any changes. The fourth bullet, which was town-wide organization, a community resource, we clarified that in our discussion, and Gus brought that up at the first meeting on August 30th. Nothing major there.
Okay.
This is where we were specifically referring to the fact that we're not building larger space because it's a new revenue generating issue, that we're actually simply continuing to be able to provide the level of service and perhaps some increased level of service, but nothing outrageous. We're not building 3 gyms when we would only need 1. That we're really just keeping the level of programming that is available to the town in our schools.
Yeah, we're not including a rec center as part of the school.
Correct. That's what we did. We said must continue to serve. So not that we're doing a brand new build of excess facilities.
Can I ask you a question, though, on the wording, right? So it's a must versus a should. A couple of these are shoulds, a couple of musts. To me, if I was to wordsmith it, I literally, having written so many contracts, words make a difference. To
Yeah.
me, again, because we're not married to this,
Yes.
when the committee gets together, they should be looking at it as this is what we should be doing. Nothing is a straight up must other than we must get a new school, right? That's the only
Exactly.
must I see. And then
Yeah.
it's beyond, like, we see the bullets and where the direction you're trying to go, but again, it's
First step.
directional. Yeah.
And where we want to begin. Open hearts, open minds. New beginnings, new opportunities. So yes, that last bullet, I know there was a lot of feedback, that costs a lot of money, but we felt strongly that this is the direction we need to go into, but this is ultimately going to be your decision. So Pete, not major edits.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, I did get the input and read all of those, and I guess what I would suggest is that there's still a substantial number of residents who are concerned that this is basically a retread of the same process, and so that gets me to my next concern, which is that when we had the meeting where we sat around the table here and sort of workshopped where we were with the schools, there was a discussion about maybe doing a survey or an after-action analysis. Have the schools committees thought anything about that further or doing something?
Well, we're really hoping that the new SBC will be able to do that.
That they'll do that? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
I mean, I loved the fella who sat behind me at the last meeting. He does this for a living. He
Mr. McEwen.
Sorry?
Mr. McEwen, I bet.
Yes, and I spoke to Carolyn Casey. She had the idea, wouldn't it be great to gather information on Medfield Day, And so we had talked about that. And, if we got a group of people to either, have a survey or a little postcard to where to get the survey, and also advertise getting updates from the town. I think a lot of people are still really disconnected. So,
So Mr. McEwen, I think it's the one who offered to do that sort of analysis for the town after the vote failed the last time. He sent a fairly lengthy email, I think he's the one. And he does it in his business, and he offered to do it for the town. I think it would be an excellent thing for someone to take him up on that offer and
I personally would like to see a collaborative effort. I feel that if the school committee did this on our own, there would be like, there
Okay.
might be some pushback
Yep.
or, again,
Yep, good point.
just a collaborative, this is a town project, this should be a town initiative. I'm happy to help in any shape or form.
Yep.
And I know other people who are very happy to help, so perhaps we can mobilize.
So those are my comments at this point. So I'm ready to go ahead and approve your application.
I appreciate that. I also just want to clarify that in the conversations that we did have during that period of time, I think we really did hand this over to the SBC because, first of all, they have a budget for it, and also that it is a building committee issue, right? And I think we spent a lot of time playing ping pong with that about who would collect and when and why. And I know that the town is anxious to hear that information. But I also think that we need to make sure that it is not another throwing pasta at the wall kind of effort, that it is a planned, collaborative effort in which we are getting the data that we really look for and not simply impressions over time. So I think that the committee, in the discussions we've had, would certainly feel that that's really an SBC issue.
Okay, thank you.
So you ready again?
Yep.
Okay. First, just for benefit of anybody listening in, this application is basically an administrative acceptance of a request by the school department and the school committee to build a new school. And according to the bylaws, if this Board of Selectmen agrees that this would be across the board for actually all building projects, if the Board of Selectmen agrees that there is a need for the building that's being requested in this application, that we are going to approve it. And in the new bylaw, what that is administratively, it triggers the magic button that then says the Board of Selectmen said it's time to build or to pull together the new school building committee in accordance with the new bylaw. So as a practical matter, like I said, I told you 2 weeks ago, I was all set to approve this. I don't think there's any doubt in any of our mind about the need for a new school. There's not any belief that this letter itself is a specification that is so restrictive or something. It's just basically, we agree, you think you need a new school, we think you need a new school, we're gonna accept the application for a new school, and that's gonna trigger the process of opening up the new school building committee.
Correct.
So, that just, from a formality standpoint, that's what we're doing tonight. I felt after I listened last night, it might be worth explaining a little more about why I've done what I've done so far, because I provided you all some feedback on the application itself before, and I'm going to do it again tonight. But my whole purpose in doing that is I believe that there is, before we build a building, there is a huge challenge to figure out how to deal with a town that became widely polarized in the last project without getting down into all of the merits or all of the specifics of a building. We need to figure out how to sand some of the really sharp edges. You made a comment about some of the comments that came in from the public, and I know which ones you are. I can even pick the one person that probably set the bar for abrasiveness. If it makes you feel better, I think we've been the target of some abrasiveness and sometimes in major, so I just will put a big part of that off to personal style and I'll give a certain measure of it to projected aggravation about what people wanted to see that they didn't see. The thing that actually surprised me more about and this is good, I hope you'll take this as good news, the number of people who revealed themselves as probably being Dale at Dale supporters, who actually posted that they appreciated what you were doing, and basically the vast majority of people are saying, look, even if I don't like what a committee's doing, I don't lose sight of the fact that they're working very hard doing it, and I don't fail to appreciate that effort. And so, although I know there were a couple that were, the little bee stings in the arm, but more than anything, I actually was encouraged by the number of positive, the recognition of the effort. Didn't necessarily mean they changed their mind, although there was a couple people that actually said, I felt this way before, and at this stage, I actually think we probably have to go in the other direction. Now, I don't know whether that's the right answer. I do know that I want to remember who those people are, because those are the people that we need more of in this town, that are actually still have an opinion, are able to hear what other people are thinking, and actually are willing to entertain how that works. And so that piece of it I felt better about. My comments before and my questions tonight are actually directed toward trying to get at what I think some of those issues are and put them out here on the table. I don't expect you to have answers for all these questions, because you didn't have them last night. But I think they have to be asked and acknowledged, and then at least to the extent you have thoughts about them. They may be different than my thoughts, but I don't know that I'm right either. And that's the other point is, my kids are all out of school. I have no skin in this game whatsoever. My only interest, however feebly I may do it, is to figure out what the best path is forward, given what people who do have skin in the game are saying and think. So I'm just trying to sort out how to cut the Gordian knot. And that's about it. So don't take any of my questions as aggressive as some of them might be. Don't take them as really intending to try to do any more than that. One thing that at the start of the meeting, I think it was Tim, somewhere in there, it was referred to some of the points that I was making and what we were asking for the school committee to do. And I think it was Tim's comments. The point he was making is, well, the school committee isn't going to tell the building committee what the building needs to be that they need to build. And I agree with that. The thing is that somewhere between a very, very amorphous, broad set of bullets like you have here and some guiding parameters for a building committee around what it is we think you should be sizing, scoping, and designing this building to do. And I'll tell you what, the one that will bubble right up to the top is the enrollment projections. If the school committee can't come up with a reliable, and I don't mean reliable, accurate, I mean something that we're willing to count on for the purpose of designing a school. If the school committee and the school department, I don't mean to leave you out there, Jeff. If the schools and the school committee can't come up with that operating projection, I don't really see how 12 people, only 2 of whom are from the school committee, and then another 4 or so who are good at building things. It's not clear to me how they would have the technical expertise to do it. And I think that issue of projected enrollment is a huge issue that actually the application letter didn't give me any greater comfort on, because we kind of both said it's going to be smaller and we need to. So there's somehow or another, it feels to me like there needs to be a number that we are designing to, recognizing it's an estimate. It's that strategic piece that links the broad overall philosophy to what a committee trying to build a building needs to do, that I would call guidance.
Yep.
That it seems to me needs to come from the school committee. So that's when I talk about things like enrollment, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about tell them how many doors or,
Yes.
It's not that. It's not even how many classrooms necessarily, although I'm guessing with the enrollment and the guidance, you could probably do the math and get to something that would be in the ballpark. So.
Class size, yep.
So anyway, that was the very first thing that came up, and I was like, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this thing in the middle. I'm going to go through the application, and as I was listening in the meeting, I wrote a bunch of, I'm not editing the application. It was just as I was listening to the meeting, as you guys were working through it, I wrote questions down. The first one was, what's the updated enrollment projection? If we don't have it, how will we get it? So I'll just register that as a question for you. I won't put you on the spot to try to answer it. The second is, I wrote down, there's a strong faction that wants the Dale site to continue to be used as a school site. What will you do, if anything, in response to this view? But as I thought about it today, I'm going to ask the question a different way. In the second bullet, you introduce the idea of a unified setting of at least 2 elementary schools as a high priority of a new elementary school or renovation addition project. And I realized in all the time I listened to you talk about that, I wasn't sure I really knew what a unified setting actually means. And here's where I'm coming from. Right now, we have three elementary level schools. We have Memorial, we have Dale, we have Wheelock. Dale is going to be replaced somewhere or renovated, one way or the other. The current Dale will not be the future Dale. We have, based on it's outdated, but based on the education plan, there were like 1,220 students in the pre-K through 5, which says 3 schools, 1,200. I had no opinion whatsoever about minimum or maximum school size. I know Chris has said 400. I actually heard separately from a different retired teacher here in town who actually, I think, is pretty well respected by a lot of people, who made the argument to me that 400's the real number. You know, I was saying, well, heck, I'm consolidating to 2, save on administration. Said, no, you can't do that. You still have 400 students, and 400 is a real number that we should have in mind. So, first off, that's a education philosophy question for you about whether that's how valid that is. It's just that when I heard it from not just Chris, but someone else who's a retired teacher, it was like, okay, it's something I don't know anything about, but at least I hear credible people saying that. Well, if I do the math, 1,200 students, we have 3 schools. I was originally thinking the unified setting meant that you were basically committing in your state, in that statement, we're saying, yeah, we're going to have schools at Dale, we're going to have schools at Wheelock, but I'm not sure that's really true. I think unified setting means 2 schools. So here's my question. We have 2 schools on the Dale site, Dale and Memorial. Is that a unified setting?
Yes.
So it is, so,
Yeah, it's a unified setting. It's a unified setting. How do we then establish what grades go in that, and how do we best share resources, which I think is one of those things that the SPC needs to really talk about,
okay.
as well as the school committee. And I think we brought that up
Okay.
last night as well,
So-
that we are open. It is not just about a unified campus.
Yep.
At some point. We are not shutting down one school. We're not doing any of that. What we want to do is make sure that there's a fiscal and educational responsibility to decreasing the number of transitions our kids go through, decreasing the number of transitions our families go through, being able to make sure that every child in town gets the opportunity for as long as possible to have access to better facilities, and that we are able to share resources and show that we want to be responsible to our townspeople for the money that you give us, not only for the school, but for our day-to-day operations.
Okay, so for a second here, I got to do just a little side load because you brought up the transition question. In my reading of the comments, there was an overwhelming number of comments that said that's not important, and in fact, transitions are good for kids. I don't want to resolve that, huh? No, there's more than that. There's more than that. There's a lot more than that, Jess. But well, regardless, my real point isn't to say so should transitions good or bad. My real point is I think the transitions issue as a philosophical debate is one of those issues that the school committee will have to orchestrate well in the interest of building a broader impression in the town that you listen to other people's views and reconcile. I don't have any idea. So I don't have an opinion. I don't have any idea. I am merely looking at what I saw in the comments, and I said, wow, there's a lot of people who actually don't think there's anything wrong with the transitions. And in fact, some people think it's something good with the transitions. So it's not like I know. It's that I think that's an issue at the education philosophy level that I think is the school committee, that to the extent, it's important to change people's perceptions. I think that's one of the issues that I think the school committee can own, and how you choose to orchestrate that conversation to get to a resolution, whatever that resolution is, you're going to have somebody on one side or the other that's not happy. How they come to understand that resolution and then think about that process. I see that as an opportunity to basically demonstrate you really are listening. I'm not arguing one or the other. But I did some more math, Jess, so back to the main point about, so if that's a unified setting, that's fine. I was thinking maybe it wasn't because, kindergarten and first grade, and then with fourth and fifth grade, maybe that's not exactly unified, but okay. If we're talking about a unified setting, and we're talking about 1,200 students, and if the 400 number means anything, that says right now we plan to have 3 schools. We're planning to build and replace 1 school. We still will have 3 schools. We will have 2 of those 3 schools at one location, I think, or the other, based on a renewed process of figuring that out. And the provision that potentially if enrollment goes down, we would go to 2 schools tells me that the unified setting is going to be, at least over time, designed to be a setting that can handle all of the classes if the enrollment goes down. So then when I sit there and say, so where does the second school go and where should it go? I don't have a good answer on that because the building committee last year was saying there wasn't room for the 2 grades that would have been the new school with Dale at Dale. And this would be talking about, 6 plus all the K, or, 7 actually, counting pre-K. And so I'm just trying to play out something 20 years down the road that says, well, what if we ever did consolidate at a site? Do you have to think about what site would be capable of handling that consolidation if part of the goal is to potentially cover that eventuality? And does that preclude one site by definition and push another one? Now, I know politically right now the answer is no, Gus, that's not. It's all open.
Yeah.
But I'm not being political here. I'm trying to sit there and think through the scenario, and I'm saying, well, if we really have to plan for that, then that unified site becomes the single unified site for everything should the eventuality that's being planned for. You see what I'm saying? I'm not arguing for case. I'm just,
Yep.
this is how my head was spinning when I was going through this, and these were the things that were coming up in
And
mind.
like I told Eileen earlier, we have work to do.
Okay.
We've got to
Okay.
do some analysis.
I'm more
due
interested
diligence.
in sharing the thoughts,
Yes,
but
no, and I'm
also
glad
letting
you
people
are.
hear that these thoughts are out there and
Yeah.
and are recognized. What's your price target for the school?
Sorry?
What's your price target for the school?
We don't have a price target.
That's a problem.
I know that.
Okay.
It's an SBC issue as well, right?
Well, my point is, and I'm talking out of school and Michelle's the new one. When the topic of price came up, she said, well, I don't know how to deal with that. I'm saying, and I'm the attack dog on price. So this is the one place you'll see my bias, is I'm the attack dog on price. And for no other reason than, well, not for no other reason, but I'm reminded of the time back in 2014 when I saw an advertisement for a car dealer that was selling $25,000 Explorers, and we needed to replace our Suburban. So we went to go look at that Explorer. I drove off with a $42,000 Explorer. I lost the battle when we started talking sunroofs. And so my point is, if you don't know kind of what you have in mind here, then trade-offs don't get made. And I'll come back to that when we get to your last bullet, because people just talk about what they need and we don't really know. Last time around, when I said, what can the town afford? The answer I got from a fellow member of the Board of Selectmen was, the voters will let us know. And it's like, I don't accept that, but that's where we're going. Well, the voters let us know. So I'm asking the question now, and this is a tougher question now, because we are going down a path that is not we haven't pre-decided to go MSBA, waiting for the MSBA to tell us we're in before we start thinking about this school. So the trick is going to be to figure out how to design a school that will be affordable with the eventuality that we never get in the MSBA program, or if we were going to wait, it would take us so many more years to do it that, we're just not willing to do that, or we're not willing to we got to do something. And so that's going to be tougher than, now on the other hand, if we make those tougher decisions, and then the MSBA comes in my view, then suddenly what happens with us is that we're in a much better financial position to start talking to Parks and Rec about a Parks and Rec facility that I think we're at least 10 years away from even considering right now. So I bring that up again, not arguing a particular spot. I'm saying I don't like the answer, well, gee, I don't know what to do about price. I guess we'll just see what it turns out to be. And I worry when we say we're gonna put it on the SBC's shoulders, then they're just gonna see what it turns out to be. Somewhere in here, I'd like to have
I
a
would
good
like
handle
to
on that.
see as part of, with the new SBC, when they explore or when they do surveys, what is the threshold for some of these families? And every family is going to be different, but I do think we do need to seek out more information from the,
So $500 on the average, $500 increase on the average real estate tax bill. Use that as a threshold. I don't know how you would answer the threshold, because the retirees wrote to me before that project saying, I can't afford any, way back in January 2020, I was getting emails from retirees
Yeah.
saying I can't afford even any increase in taxes. And I was sitting there going, well, I can't do that.
But I like some of the
After the failed vote, I
suggestions.
haven't heard from retirees. You know who I've heard from? Parents. Who were saying, "Phew, boy, am I glad we didn't get hit with that." And so when we talk threshold, I think we kind of have to, anchor it off average tax bill. And I think that, you can argue with me whether the 500 is right, but it ain't 850. So there, so I think somewhere in this process, we have to put that stake in the ground. There may be, at the tail end of the process, there may be something that the school wants, and we can have a public discussion about, I know this is gonna violate that threshold that we put, or the stake, but here's why we think it's really important, here's why we think you should want it. And I'm not averse to having a public discussion that says, yeah, we get it, okay. I'm averse to a public discussion that says, I have no idea what this cost is gonna be, but we're gonna go through all this great stuff, and it's gonna come out to a number, and we're gonna say it's for the children. And that's kind of where that goes if you don't start dealing with the cost issues early on, which is why I first put the stake in the ground January 2020, because I've learned you can't talk about this stuff 2 months before the vote.
I think we've learned that.
So,
I
okay.
agree.
So I
But I'd
didn't
also
think
like
you'd
to add,
Sure.
in the feedback, there were a couple of comments about, maybe Westwood does something with the taxes with the
Mm-hmm.
elderly, or, I thought those were some creative, I don't know too
Yeah,
much about that.
I'm actually against that, although I'd entertain real ideas. But what that does is that say, well, the people that are gonna vote against it, let's just insulate them from the consequences of their financial decisions. That's why I'm against it, is suddenly the people that this town should be a town that is taking everybody into account, not isolating out all these. If you wanna do something like that, what would be better is the people who really don't mind doing that, let's start a public funding campaign to build a subsidy budget for all the people who really say, I don't care if you raise my taxes, but I have talked to people who said, taxes go up $1,000. Yeah, I didn't really notice. I didn't even think about that. It's a rounding error for me. It's like, well, good for you, but it's not a rounding error for a whole lot of people. But if there's people like that, why don't we just figure out the difference? It's $500 versus $1,000. Those people who don't think that's a problem, throw this into this public fund. It's going to take us a few years anyway. All these people that don't care can put that $500 a year into that public fund. And by the time we're ready to build the school, we'll have an extra $20 million to cover the difference.
That goes to the point where I think the feedback has illuminated discussion points that we should explore.
Right.
you
And that's my only point here isn't to drive you to decisions. It's to try to eliminate the discussion
Yes.
points that occurred to me. When do you want the school to be up and running?
Tomorrow?
No, realistically. Well, this is another version of the same question I asked, the very first question I asked after the failed vote. For planning purposes, how many years do we think it's going to take? Because we actually do need to look at the Dale Street School, and thinking about capital expenditures on the Dale Street School is strongly influenced by whether we're planning to use it for 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, another 10 years. Our capital decisions have to be different. So again, it's a question, I don't need the answer now, but, and where it really kicks in is if we said, for argument's sake, we want it in 5 years, and we don't get accepted by the MSBA this year, and we don't get accepted by the MSBA next year, and we don't get accepted by the MSBA the year after that, all of a sudden, the window of our planning closes to where, no, it looks like we're gonna build our own school. And it's like, if we don't do that, the last time around, it was 10 years that we kept waiting for the MSBA, and it was a long, long time. I don't think we can do that this time around. So that's why I'm asking the question. It's a planning thing. How should we think about this stuff? I already talked about the unified school. What's your view of the elementary school? What's your view of the elementary school rule that there should be 400 students? You got that already. And I think all my further questions on that were around if we had to get to 2 schools, what's the implications for a unified setting in 2 schools? If the 2 schools were going to be a consolidation of all elementary grades, if our enrollment went down, does that have implications of which site is viable? You had the discussion about the thing that came up about the community resource. When you were here last time, you were very clear, Anna Mae, that the intention is not to put anything additional into the school. So not to add any cost to the school beyond what the school is doing for education purposes. I sensed that message got a little bit fuzzed up last night, so I just am emphasizing that I think that's what we said. What we did, the one thing that didn't get brought up, if I'd been there, I probably would have said something. In the visioning committee, the thing that I absolutely am behind was the idea of designing a school with the thought that people after hours could use it. So the thought that had come up in the school design was that you would have the public amenities would be at the front end of the school, so you'd be able to lock the rest of the school off, and you'd be able to open up that subset. I am totally on board with that, and in fact, I actually tried to beat down the skepticism about that at that meeting that we had at the library, because as long as we're doing that and we're not adding cost to the school, I'm good. If we had a clear target for the school, and we designed the school and we said, well, we got an extra $3 million to play with, and this would be really good, I wouldn't be fighting that. It's that we have this open-ended issue about what the school's going to cost. And then that means then if we're adding cost to the school, we've got the schools getting into businesses that aren't education, but they're maybe an overlap with Parks and Rec or something else. The model of the public safety building that has effectively 2 rooms that can be used for meetings, one of which is a training room that they needed, and one is a real meeting room, and the fact they make it available for the town, that's exactly the model of what I think we should be doing with the school. So just to clarify that. Jessica, I have one issue with the point you made about the last bullet. And this is a hot button for me because this is a very specific
I'm sorry, about the last
about the last bullet around sustainability.
Sustainability, yes.
Again, if there's a firm price for the school, and we're doing things that maybe even cost more that fit within that price envelope, good, all for it. If there's no price for the school and we're saying sustainability, well, it's a good thing to do and educate the kids, and whatever the price is, that I'm not on board with. 2 points.
Did I ever imply that?
Yeah, what you said is, aren't we obliged to support the 2050? Now, if you didn't...
No, I never said 2050. I was surprised by 2050. What I said was that I believe that there are goals that Medfield has adopted towards sustainability. Now, if that was incorrect...
It's incorrect. That is
Okay.
incorrect. So
That's fine.
So for the record here...
But I do think that there was a leadership point that we also made, that it isn't so much about that we can have a consideration around sustainability because it is the fiscally responsible thing to do as we move on. And if you, and yet I don't think that necessarily precludes the idea that we would have a budget and we would do and use that budget as efficiently as possible. Now, if you're going to pin me down on what you think, I think the price of a school should be, and then we back into that, you would be asking the wrong person, because I am not an expert at school building, nor was I on the school building committee last time. I think it's a fascinating exercise, and I'm very excited to see what the other 8 qualified individuals from the town will be able to come up with in concert with the consultants. And I think that that's a town-wide issue. But I don't think that it is appropriate to kind of dig down and say, and I've got an issue with you, Jess, for
Well, so,
saying
well,
those
let me,
things.
let me tell you what my issue was and why it was my issue. So the short answer is the town is not committed to any climate goals yet because the TOMCAP, the Climate Action Plan, which incidentally is a climate action plan, it's not a comprehensive environmental action plan, has not been completed, has not been priced, and has not been presented to the town to decide they're prepared to support it. When the article, I spoke against the article when it was first put
Right.
up. The reason I spoke against the article is I said the appropriate time to bring this before the taxpayers is when you have a specific plan with real dollars and real goals. That's what you need people to do. A number of people disagreed. Most people, not all, but most people disagreed with me. They thought that it was worth making a statement, making a principled statement. That's fine. We did that. The one point I made in my opposition speech was, don't let anyone tell you after the fact that you have signed a blank check. Because there was no check signed. There was, the TOMCAP article was advertised as we're not asking for any money at this time. And my point was, don't let anyone tell you you've signed a blank check. So I react rather strongly if I get a sense that people say, well, we already said we're going to do this. And I've had several people who have stated that.
Oh, but
Well,
I don't
didn't we
think I was
already-
that casual about it,
Okay.
Gus. And I do
Well,
want to
yeah.
kind of push back against your characterization of that, because I do feel as though sustainability is not simply, perhaps you're misinterpreting the word sustainability for simply smart financial decisions over time based on our resources. I think we all see right now.
But agreement on that, we're good.
So we all see right now, our energy costs are going through the roof everywhere, right? Our water costs are about to increase. We know that natural gas and our oil supply is crippling our economy. In this very moment, I'm not saying that that's going to continue, but
Right.
trust me, the cycle is such that it will continue and it will continue to get worse. Do we want to be pound foolish and penny wise when it comes to sustainability, when those things are about resources? They're about resources, and it's about being smart for the long term. And that's what I've been saying
So
for
what,
the 5-6 years that I've been on the committee at this point. So I just want to make sure that I understand what your point is. You're saying I didn't write you a blank check, and I'm saying I didn't even ask for a blank check. All I said was, this is pretty important to be financially responsible to our town and to our climate.
So then, well, you and I will probably have debates as around what financially
Always,
responsible
but they're so
ultimately means.
enjoyable.
Huh?
But they're so enjoyable.
No. It'll probably, where we will run across future debates will be around what's financially responsible.
I think you'd be surprised.
I want to tell you the second reason I'm so hot on this, though,
Mm-hmm.
is when the net zero standard as opposed to net zero ready standard was adopted for the last school, the presentations that were made to the Board of Selectmen and the questions I asked to follow up on it made it clear to me that in the case of Lexington, they had been able to do net zero at no net added cost to the school.
I remember that presentation, and I was,
Yeah, so, and
it
then.
seemed a little sketchy to me, too.
And then,
quite
well, and
frankly.
then what happened is I had a conversation with someone who actually doesn't remember the conversation to point out that the ground source heat pumps actually were an added cost, except that the way that was said is it was financed separately, and the servicing of that loan was totally covered by the Eversource incentives, at which point I said, hey, you can violate my rules around total cost of the school if you can do a self-financed thing outside of the schools. It's not like I don't want to see us do this stuff.
Yeah.
It's that I don't want to see us do this stuff without worrying about the cost.
Right.
When I tried to find out the incremental cost of net zero in the actual school, when I went to the Energy Committee, they said, look, we're not designing the school. When I went to the Building Committee, they said, look, that's the Energy Committee that's advocating this stuff. I could not get that answer. I've gotten, I think, a good estimate of it since, from neither of those sources, but I think I've got a good handle. I think it's $3 million, but of added cost to the school. So the sensitivities that I have are not allowing this cost to just build up because we have good ideas. That doesn't mean I don't think I have solar panels on my roof. I will go through 6 or 7 months, maybe 8 months of not paying Eversource a dime this year. So it's
I
not,
have
this has
read.
got nothing to do with me being against these concepts, but it has to do with ensuring financial discipline around things.
So I think, though, that it's really important to understand in this brainstorming time where we're talking about what's important, not necessarily what must absolutely happen, but the things that are important. These are important goals to look towards. And so I think you and I share that view. You may want me to give you a dollar amount right now. That would be inappropriate. I would be giving you false information, and I won't put a stake in the ground.
Well, I'm not looking for any answers tonight. My
But
point
I
is,
do want to make sure that you understand that there is no reason that we would decide, you know, we want to, our goal is to build an educational facility for the best use of our town and our children, right? That's it.
no, well, keep going. What else is your goal?
That is the best goal.
What's your
That
goal,
is the
what's your
highest-
goal for it being affordable for the people of this town?
I think that that is something, I mean, you and I can continue to kind of banter back and forth about this if you would like to, but it's getting late. The problem is
Well,
that you're
no, let's
asking
not
me
banter,
for
but, no,
answers.
but I would like an answer to that question,
But
Jess.
I can't give you an answer right now, Gus.
Okay.
Nor can the rest of the committee, because we are starting from the ground,
That's okay.
right? So if I were to put a stake in the ground and say this much or that much, how unfair would that be to our
That's-
citizens
That's fine.
right
I'm
now?
not looking for an
Because
answer.
that is what people hang their hats on. They hang their hats on that stake,
Yep.
and then that becomes not realistic, and then
So.
people get angry and feel
Well,
like we've sold them a
affordability
bill of
doesn't
goods.
change. So can I count on you to, at some point here, make the pronouncement about what you believe, or not you personally, but the school committee, what the affordability of a school would be, what you think the town can afford?
Why would the school committee, in a nutshell, do that when there will be a well-qualified group of the school building committee with a warrant committee representation, with building representation? If you want us to say, well, I think that this should cost $12, we're gonna give you $12 to build this school. That is as realistic
Jess?
for us to give you that quote right now, while we are giving a bullet point
My question
proposition.
is simple. Well, this is, as I said, this is not the issue. My question is simple.
Your question is
How
simple but
will
unanswerable right now.
affordability- My question is simple. How will affordability be worked into this process? So far, I've heard one, and I'm not saying this to
And I'm
fault
not
her, 'cause
speaking
she's
for the entire committee,
No, I know,
because
I
I
know,
don't think
I
we've
know.
had this conversation.
Yeah.
So I do need to be very sure and very clear that people out there understand that this is kind of a conversation Gus and I are having
Yeah,
together right now, and
Yep.
I'm not speaking for the committee.
right. And my main point, and again, I'm not looking for an answer tonight. My point is affordability matters.
You're absolutely correct. It matters to me.
And I'm trying to find out where affordability is going to show up in this process.
You can ask that, and I would actually beg you to continue to ask that. And I hope that the state gives us some indication as to whether they're going to approve the bylaw and when, so that we really can get on with the, are you two communicating in a meeting with?
No, this is the online
Feedback.
messages.
Oh, okay.
So my battery died before I plugged it in,
It's
so
a terrible thing.
I'm just, great,
Gus,
okay.
I would suggest to you that we got a fairly comprehensive number the last time as to what a school
And it took
costs.
several years to get there.
And
And
so
it
that
didn't
we knew
pass.
that 82 million was the number to build what the committee thought we needed.
Right,
And
The school
and
building
we know
committee.
that people did value engineering to get rid of anything that was excess, so that you're gonna,
no,
and I know that you wanted to spend 50 million. So the question then becomes, what third of the school do you not build? Do you not have
So
a
I-
gymnasium? Do you not have the cafeteria?
And that becomes
And
an
so
issue
that's a
that
problematic
the SBC
result,
should
so
do.
that you,
right,
All of
right.
us
So
together.
so the short answer is, so we
Well,
know
no,
that
but
number
let me just
was
finish,
too
Gus,
high.
before we all want the most affordable school that the town
Mm-hmm.
can get. The reality is that the damn schools are very expensive to build. And
That was an overpriced school. It was an overbuilt school.
I-
The
well,
projections,
I-
the projections were too
The people
high.
who reported to us from
Yeah,
the
I'm
committee,
not
Mr.
gonna-
Marcucci,
we're not gonna
who
go
was a
here.
select
We're
board
not-
member, said that
we're
it
not
had
going
been
here.
value engineered, You apparently disagree with that, so.
We're not, I'm not gonna go there, because I honestly don't think we need to go back and re-adjudicate the last one. That
No,
school was too
but-
expensive.
And that's what my effort is here.
And so that
And
we.
to say
You're
that
not- You don't understand
It
the
wouldn't
data
be
we have
fair.
here.
It wouldn't be fair to the people, it
Right.
wouldn't be fair to you, it wouldn't be fair to the committee, it wouldn't be fair to the administration to say, you know, right now, Gus, I'm gonna give you a number off the top of my head. Your
Which,
point has been made,
again, I'm
you
not looking
feel
for-
it's important, and I do
There
too.
you go, okay.
And I assume that the
Right.
rest of the townspeople, all of you, the warrant committee, the SBC, the chair, Dr.
Right.
Marston, all of us who live here feel that this is very important, but it is premature right now for me
I'm-
to tell you.
And
I think it
I
should be
was not
12
looking,
bucks.
again,
Gus
my
isn't looking
point,
for that tonight. I
my
think the
point
thing-
is, I'm putting the affordability issue on the table and
As-
saying it's a big issue, and that's the point, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
fully
So,
respect that.
so anyway.
But I also
I'm-
don't think that we should necessarily be kind of to pin this on us right now and be asking for an answer is not necessarily a fair.
Not asked, so, and I'm not. The whole spirit of all my comments was I know what, I have some idea of some of the things that drive people apart. You're right, Anna Mae, the feedback, a
Right.
good amount of it, in fact, you
I
could
have
look
it
retrospect, it's
coded.
there. It's around cost.
Mm-hmm.
My interest is in getting this town back together.
Right.
My interest actually is is to the extent, again, however feebly I could do it anyway, to help the school committee be able to have more productive discussions with the public and have less of the prickly conversations coming in. When the building committee is formed, is to basically, where I have any opportunities to provide opinions or thoughts, to do so in the interest of getting us a school. So we definitely want a school.
I am most invested in getting
Okay.
us a school.
All right.
And I think
So-
that we all agree on the affordability issue.
Okay,
However, whatever that is and what that process is, doesn't have to be decided right now in this room.
correct. It has to be decided, but not right now. Okay, that's it. That's all. Those are the main points I had. Like I said, I thought last night's meeting was actually a good meeting. I think it's, the first step in a long process
Absolutely.
to some of the defensiveness. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important that we got feedback from people like, remove bullet this, remove that. Going back to our opening conversation, I'm not asking you to do that, because all we're doing is using this as a launching point, right? When the school building committee gets together, that's when they can start looking at this and saying, you know what, as 12 people, we agree or disagree, right? But I do agree what Gus is saying is, as the school building committee gets together, there should be some guidance from the school committee that says, because no one just says to a builder, build a house. You give them some guidelines, how many bedrooms, how many baths, and truly what's your budget? So that's got to be, again, a range, not this is the number we can't go past. But that's going to start, again, the town talking about things, right? And the more we get people talking up front, the more we start vetting out. I love getting emails. I love people pulling me aside, having candid conversations, I love when people walk away and go, we can agree to disagree, but this is a good conversation. That's what's going to get this town together. So everything I just heard Gus say in the dialogue with you guys is, he's not asking for an answer tonight, but you've at least heard it, and we can start getting the conversation going, and I appreciate it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were saying there's a crazy man over there.
Let's point
Cut
it
it, cut it.
I just want to highlight how critical the enrollment piece is. When we went to that original meeting with MSBA and then we meet with demographers, Christine was there, I had asked for a 450 student school. That was what went in there, and we asked for, and they wouldn't let us leave the room without what they said to us. So that, and I've told you this before, Gus, that projection was coming off what happened in Hopkinton. And Hopkinton had a situation where they were building the marathon school, and halfway through they had to add additional 4 classrooms. They're actually adding more classrooms now onto that. And I think MSBA was really looking at making sure that didn't happen again to us. As the process went on, and I'm just trying to clarify this, I know there's stuff out there that isn't really true, so I want to just kind of clarify it a little bit. As the process went on, Mike Quillen and I reached out to MSBA and said, listen, we use NESDEC. NESDEC have been dead on for us for as long as I've been here, and I used them in my former district too. We're not seeing the numbers that you're projecting. We're just not seeing them. what can we do to change this? And we were told that if you want to change the numbers, then you have to go right back into the program again and start all over. That we trust our numbers and that's what we're going with. So if you want to go for a new building, this is what you got to go with. And that's exactly how it happened. And we asked for a 450, and I know that there was some things out there that, you know, I didn't do this, or it's just not true. So but I think to Eileen's point, that is critical, because as we all know, that's driving the cost. Whatever enrollment number we come up to, whether it's 400, 500, 350, 250, 275, whatever that comes out to be, that's driving. Prior to the vote, I asked our architects if they could, I think there was a lot of conversation around the cost. I forget what it was. I know 62 million was the end for the town, the ending cost. But if we were going to remove, actually use your number, Gus. What would this building look like if it was going to cost 50 million to the town? And they gave us some pretty good examples of what we could do. And a lot of it was removing that classroom space. And I think that's, as we know, is going to be the driver for this next project. And getting an accurate number for that enrollment that we can all agree on, so that there's not, you know, articles every week about, you know, the enrollment. Because we didn't agree with the enrollment either. We were very clear with MSBA on that, but at that point, there's nothing we could do about it. So
Yeah,
I just want to highlight the fact that your point is dead on, because that's going to be the most important piece.
I appreciate you saying that. To be honest, I didn't appreciate that a year ago, that's what you had tried to do. I have, after the fact, looked at it and said, you know, if we had sized it properly, the cost issue wouldn't have been there.
Correct.
I don't know whether that would have been enough, because the location issue might have still been there, but the cost issue wouldn't have been there. And I think it would have, you know, it's, who knows after the fact whether that's what cost us the project, but.
But, you know, not all of what MSBA does is negative, right? So when they say things like, you need to have a 900 square foot classroom, yeah, you need 900 square foot classroom. Like, that's what I would, whether we're doing our own or MSBA, you know, people are fixated on things like 2 sinks in a classroom. Well, that's what modern schools have now. I mean, that's what they do. So I think that MSBA has criteria, but they're based on best practice in good schools, and they've built a lot of schools. So I don't think that all their things are negative, like I see. But I also think if we're going to be doing the dance with MSBA for 3 or 4 years before we get in, we got to do something. So anyway, I just want to touch on the enrollment part. That's all.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. All right. Did we have something we had to vote on here?
Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Some people want to go home. Get a motion.
I would move to accept the application for the new school, is it, or for the new committee?
After all these hours. What was this about?
New elementary school project, thank you.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Hallelujah.
Application is accepted.
Right.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks to this, absolutely. Yeah. Now's when the fun starts, kind of. All right. Okay, now if I can find, I still haven't logged on, so I don't know whether people see me or not, but I'm working on it. Let's see, the next item that we have is discussion of the Safety Committee Charter and possible name change. Let's see if I can find that. That was,
Okay.
those all go here.
So as you know, we are reviewing and then sometimes drafting charters for committees that are existing or you are proposing. And we have been working on, one of the things I've been working on is that we have what we call the Safety Committee. And I am recommending we change that to the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. We did not have a charter for the Safety Committee, and we found several people over the last year or so, I'd say probably 2 years, who were interested in joining the committee until they found out what the committee actually did. And they assumed it was a public safety review committee, and they were participating in either the police department or the fire department review. So I thought it would make more sense for us to actually properly name this committee. There's several other towns whose committees have the same focus as ours, and they use this title as well. And it just lays out a charter that says we'll identify, review, and evaluate options for improving conditions for pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers of motorized vehicles of all ages and abilities. It's an advisory committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Items for review will be forwarded from the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator. The committee will review and provide recommendations back to the Board of Selectmen. And then I had discussed increasing it. I believe we were looking at actually 7 members. I apologize if your version says 6, but I had increased that to 7 before I left last Thursday.
We have 5.
Yeah, I'd actually increased it to 7. I
So
apologize.
7.
I increased it to 7.
And we currently have some people on it, though, right?
We currently have people on it. So currently, the police chief, Mogale, the deputy director, myself, Steve Caskey, and unfortunately, I'm drawing a blank on our 4th committee member's name. I
Kristen
apologize.
Donner, I think, is on it.
No, Christian Donner's no longer on it, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Let's see. I apologize. I'll come up with his name for you.
So, oh, that's okay. So there is
So
one-
there are existing
so
2, yes.
5 slots are filled.
Yep.
We would be, with 7, we'd be looking at adding 2 more members.
Yes, and you've had some interest, and we had posted that there were going to be openings on the committee, and actually, I asked the chief, in my absence on Thursday and Friday, had scheduled a safety committee meeting for tomorrow. I asked her to postpone that until we voted on the charter and worked on the new membership. One of the things we had, the safety committee's been around since I started in Medfield, and we had a process in place, but again, these were always our unwritten processes that ideas or what things people wanted to improve or bring to your attention were brought to the selectmen, and then the selectmen forwarded that so that you were not, the advisory committee was not hearing them directly without you having had any input on before they went to the safety committee. So I just formalized the prior process that we had just to streamline it.
Eileen, questions?
Does this go in line with the letter that was shared with us tonight that went to the chief?
That went to the chief today. I just received that today.
Okay.
Yep. And so I think that letter is something that should come to the Board of Selectmen before it goes to the safety committee.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. No, I love this idea. I think this is, especially if we get a good breadth of, so we don't have members at large filled yet, or we do?
We have 2. We have 2 that are currently serving, and you'll need to fill 2 seats as well.
All right, so I see 5. Are you saying there's more than 5?
I added 2. I apologize. My updated version did not make it in there.
Okay.
I was doing it from the car on my phone.
I
so
thought I was looking at it wrong.
apologize.
Okay, got it.
No, I was recommending, you can stay with 5. I was just recommending that you increase it to.
No, I think 7's better.
7.
I like that, yep.
I think 7 members is a much better number, given that there are 3 members from the town staff on it already, so that there are
Correct.
only 4 citizens then that are going to be on it. I know that there are 2 people that have already expressed an interest in being on it, and working on this issue. So I think it's a great idea. I wouldn't be personally stuck on the idea that they only think about things that are referred to them by the select board. I think if they generate ideas on their own, that the select board can then react to them. And that's it for me.
So the only question,
Oh, you might have been turned on.
hello? Oh, that was off. How about that? Somehow or another I hit the microphone. Okay, sorry about that. I should have just plugged in to start with. The only question I had, and you know I don't like large committees, so I'm not coming from the standpoint of wanting to add people just to add them, but we've had, I'm not sure which two volunteers you're talking about. I'm curious, I guess, on how many have volunteered. I know the Souls of Medfield as an organization has expressed an interest in being involved with this, so that's like 1 slot. I can think of at least 1 other person that's applied. If those are the only 2 applied, then 2 more positions would be the right number. But if 15 people applied.
No, I think we only have, I want to say we have 2. There's the outside chance we have a 3rd that came in, but I believe we only have 2.
Okay.
But I will double check with
So we would
Brittany.
be able to accommodate the
I believe
people
you
that have
accommodate.
expressed an interest in doing this. And I assume the chief would like to keep the size committee
Yes.
as well.
Yep, she was fine with it. I reviewed this with her today.
Okay, then I'm good.
Would this committee actually be responsible for, you know, the device that the chief explained to us that she got maybe a month and a half ago, that they can put on poles?
The chief has the authority to do that, so the chief retains that authority.
Okay.
She
would
could
be
take
looking for
recommendations of
input? Okay.
doing it, but the chief for her own speed enforcement would maintain that authority.
Okay.
All right, so we
I'm ready.
need to
Works for me.
just,
We have public comment.
oops, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Chris. So I just have I guess a question on, kind of piggybacking on Pete's point in terms of clarification of when something goes to the selectmen and then when something goes to the safety committee. Because, I mean, as you well know, because I've emailed about this numerous times, I'll give you an example with the situation on Curve Street. When Richard was a selectman, the selectmen voted to pursue a truck exclusion. Nothing had happened with that for a number of years. Nothing still happened. I then decided to go to the safety committee and talk to the safety committee about it, received feedback that it would be investigated, and nothing has happened since. And there was nothing on the agenda for the safety committee on this particular topic as to keep it on the radar as follow-up. So,
No pun intended.
yeah, no pun intended. So, you know, is this something that needs to go back to the selectmen, or is it in the safety committee hands
So,
based on
So
the charter?
if I can
Yes,
weigh in,
please,
because I
please.
know
Yep.
Pete and I were here when this came up, is I think that should go back to the Board of Selectmen. I think that's a bigger issue than the safety committee, and I don't think I don't think these current members were on the board when that was discussed, but I don't think that anybody has any issue with it. I think it should just start back here.
Okay, because that was a
Yeah.
different message that I got from the safety committee meeting.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that as you're finalizing the charter, that it's clear when these kind of situations come up, what rises to the level of selectmen and what rises to the level of safety committee, so you don't have people like me who say, this is in limbo, and it's been in limbo for 5 years at this point.
That's why I think the new, going back to the old process we had of everything going to the selectmen first and the selectmen deciding what they want to tackle or what they would like to defer to the safety committee is a much better process.
The only thing I was going to say is the way it was left when the selectmen voted to pursue the truck exclusion, it was put back in the hands of the police chief, because it was the police chief's role to reach out to the Department of Transportation, because that was the next step.
Right.
So it kind of became a ping pong ball.
I 100% agree, and we'll put it on the agenda for the 27th, but I think we have new chief, new selectmen members. I think, you know.
So let me push back on that. I haven't given Christina a hard time in one of these meetings in a long time. And Pete, you can speak to this as well, because you're the only one who actually can speak with authority. My view is if the Board of Selectmen, past Board of Selectmen, have already taken up this issue and have made a decision on this issue, then the problem we have right now is simply the town has not acted on a decision of the Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
There's no particular reason why
Bring it up
this
again.
needs to come back up for the Board of
That's-
Selectmen.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So if there was a reason like Curve Street, there are no cars that go on it anymore, and therefore the scooters could be able to go both directions, then there'd be a reason to bring it back up to us for a review, but I don't see any reason why we have to vote at all. It's already been a decision that was made by a past vote of selectmen that just has not been acted on. So the only issue we have here is what it's gonna take to get
Where's
it
the
acted on.
follow-up?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So that probably means it gets referred to the police chief who inherits a job that wasn't done by a predecessor a long time ago, and but for Chris's memory and persistence, we probably would have all forgotten about it, and
And the bridge hasn't gotten any wider.
that'd be my,
That's fine with us.
All right,
We'll put it on
good.
the next agenda.
we all good?
Thank you.
It'll save us a good 2 minutes next meeting. So we have to vote to approve the name change? Or
Yes,
simply,
I would vote the name change and the new
okay?
Pedestrian
charter,
traffic.
and we'll get
Yep,
that on the
I'm good-
website
I'm
and
good with that.
get that up there, and then we can put the members who are interested in serving on, because we've already advertised it, we can put it on your 9/27
Okay.
agenda.
Okay,
Okay.
So I would move that we change the name as indicated by the town administrator and the charter to reflect what she accounted, and that we set the number of members of the committee at 7.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, the continued review of the charter for the Dog Control Bylaw Committee.
All right, so this reflects some of the edits that I made from our last meeting, because I just received it. So I think that's what the red is. And that's actually even some feedback from citizens that read it and said, specifically changing dog walkers to people out walking dogs. So we're not, because sometimes when we refer to dog walkers, people think those are people that have dog walking companies versus just someone out walking a dog.
So, yeah, the only editorial thing, I'd strike the word there, because then the dog walkers aren't walking their dogs, they're walking somebody else's dogs.
Okay,
Just say
that's
people out
true.
walking dogs.
People out walking dogs, there you go.
I had an edit under scope and focus, that first paragraph on the second page. Second line, so the first sentence says, the focus of this committee's efforts should be on the town's approach to managing dog walking on the town's open spaces. And then there's a clause here that says, although it's possible, if not likely, that these recommendations will be incorporated into the town's existing dog control bylaws. I would strike, although it's possible, if not likely, and I would just replace with the likelihood. So it'd be, focus this committee's efforts should be on the town's approach to managing dog walking on the town's open spaces, with the likelihood that these recommendations will be incorporated into the town's existing dog control bylaws. And then the other stuff I had was just questions.
So further down in that paragraph, it's the second to last line says are likely to be applicable to all open spaces in town. I would change that to are likely to be applicable to the entire town.
No.
Well, then, so you want, I think we had this discussion before.
Yeah.
Then this replaces this place replaces rules for everybody. Every place in town, not the open space that was the problem.
Right, I think we need a set of uniform dog rules across the whole town.
So we'll make dogs can be off leash if they're under positive control through the center of town.
Off leash in the downtown? I don't think so. I don't think that's.
So that would be uniform with the rules we have for the open space.
Right.
Well, I think, what we're doing is we're asking a committee to come up with the rules, but I think we want the rules to apply to the whole town.
I don't think that was the intent of this.
Yeah.
So I think starting the group off with this, and if that discussion leads that way, so be it. But I think right now we're responding to how many emails and conversations we've had with citizens that no longer want to go to specific areas in this town because of the interaction that they're having with dogs and dog owners. So I think we're making this bigger than it needs to be and keep it narrow right now. And if it goes wider per the committee, so be it. 2 cents.
But I would agree with that. I mean, I was being facetious when I said dogs could be off leash in the center of town if they're under positive control. My point was what this really does is if you have a single bylaw for the entire town, is we have a leash law that says dogs must be on leash at all times in all areas in town if we want a uniform bylaw. If we want a segment of the bylaw to specifically address open space, then we address the fact that that would have the likelihood of being incorporated into the existing dog control bylaws right now that apply to the rest of the town.
Well, I think our existing dog control bylaw has a huge gap in it that makes it really unenforceable, so that we don't really have a dog bylaw.
It does, that's correct. They're not required to be on. Your facetious point is correct.
It's exactly right, yeah.
If you have
Nobody's
your dog
required to be
under
on a leash
voice
in Medfield.
control, You're in compliance with the bylaw, no matter where you are in the town. That's how it's worded.
Yeah, and that's a problem, so.
Right.
Well, I would say it's not a problem, because the problems that we're having are already being brought up to us, and that's what the intent of this is to tackle the issues that we know are the problems in the town. Like, I'm not hearing anybody having a dog wreaking havoc in front of brothers. Last I heard, there's no librarian calling, that they're not running loose in the shopping parking lot, but we know for certain that what we've called out here is where our issues lie, and which is what we should be putting as our top priority, and not getting lost in the weeds.
Well, in all due respect, the starting point would be to make it uniform unless there was some reason not to. That would be my
Well,
recommendation.
there is a reason not to. because the issue we have is with the open spaces.
Mhm.
That's where the problem is. We've already had one dog control bylaw review that was for the town that just ground itself out on the rocks. We have an issue that we're trying to address. Now, you know, Pete, my arguments
The
here,
only reason why you
Pete,
couldn't have the problem, you just haven't, but there's nothing
Well-
that says you, there's no reason why it's only the open spaces that have been problems.
well, yeah, there is, because that's the only place that people don't necessarily exercise the common sense that they exercise in the center of town. Because it's a different set of circumstances, so their application of their judgment is different in the open space than in downtown. We don't have people getting knocked to the sidewalk by happy dogs off leashes in front of brothers. So this is trying to come up with a theoretical improvement to an aspect of dog behavior in town that isn't a problem in the interest of uniformity with dog control in another part of town that is a problem. If, you know, Pete, my arguments here have to do with pragmatic issues of getting progress done here. If we came up with wonderful wording for what dogs need to do in terms of control in the open space, and we thought that wonderful wording was so great that it would be an improvement for what the dog rules in town would be, then I think it would be easy to change, you know, to expand it. But if we give this committee the job to take a look at the entire town's dog control bylaws in all areas of the town, most of which aren't a problem, then I think you're gonna dilute their focus, and we're not gonna get the answer we want to the problem we have. We're gonna get this broader statement about the whole town.
Well, I think we have a better chance of it getting accepted, to be quite honest.
Well,
Because I
that's
think
it-
if we
that
do
too.
the blatant,
Yeah.
people are gonna say, you're not gonna tell me what I can't
Yeah.
do, blah, but these are the areas where, on a weekly basis, we get some communication.
Yeah.
And so let's tackle what we know is a known problem, and
Right.
let's not go looking for other problems.
Bill?
That's my take on it.
Bill Massaro, Evergreen Way. I apologize for not having read the latest version of this. Don't you still get stuck with the issue of enforcement, and how do you enforce this thing?
That's all part of it, yeah, that's part of it, sure.
I mean, that seems to be the number one problem. I mean, we've already discussed it on a couple of other issues tonight about, you know, we don't have a way to enforce the bylaw
The one
or to
good thing I'll-
penalize someone.
So, Bill, I think the one thing this does do that our current bylaw doesn't do is this specifically addresses having a dog on a leash, whereas the other one is all voice control. So if this gets passed in the series, that you have to have a dog on a leash.
I understand that, but I mean, so if someone violates the law and does not have someone on there, what is the penalty for that person? That needs to be the
so-
number one recommendation, I think, that needs
Maybe
to
not,
be made.
not if we can't do enforcement. I'm hoping this committee will, think about the discussion we just had with Mo.
That's exactly what I'm
And
talking
what
about.
did- and where
so-
did we go with that? Public shaming.
The one thing you do have under the dog bylaw, the whole bylaw, you have the ability to impound the dog for a whole enumerated set of issues, including being a nuisance, with examples given. So you do have some added authority. And once the dog's impounded, the owner has to pay everything that's due, fines, et cetera, in order to have the dog released. So we do have a little more, I don't want
So
to
maybe-
say.
So that
there
needs
is-
to be,
Yeah, maybe there are.
that
some-
knowledge
yeah.
needs to be made available to the
yeah.
committee. I mean, and I had suggested before, you may want to find out what's happening on some of bordering properties, like what's happening
Well,
with
that's-
Trinity, what's happening with the other. I had suggested that
Right.
earlier.
Yeah, I don't know that we're gonna
I don't
follow
know that you
Trinity's
take what
rules.
they have, but I mean, you at least ought to know what they have, especially since you're going to be using the adjoining property.
Well, and I think it's gonna be interesting, the dialogue that'll come out of this, that there may be, we've kicked it around in all these different meetings about what could we be doing up at the state hospital when people come in? Is there a registration form? Is there something that we could be doing to try to track dogs and dog owners? Again, I'm not solving it tonight, I'm just throwing ideas out there, but I think there could be a good dialogue, especially for people that are professional dog walkers, people that are just up there for recreation, and then people that don't have a dog at all that are up there. Have them get their great minds together and start kicking around ideas. But the one caveat is, we know right now, other than impounding a dog, we don't have any teeth in this, and that's been a frustration.
No pun intended.
Exactly.
I
But think-
avoided that.
But I've actually talked to people since our last meeting, when I was up at the state hospital, about the sign. And I said to someone, if we could put a sign under the sign that says, This is a courtesy. Like, either respect the people you're walking with up here, because then that's a shaming. Like, if you're gonna say, screw you, I don't care about you,
No,
then, you know, don't come walk at the state
And that
hospital.
was Trinity's point. They made that statement a couple of times too about, common courtesy and, respect.
I took a walk a week or two ago and deliberately walked around. It was a quiet time of the day, and I was actually curious how many dogs in the quad were on leashes, and the answer was none of them. There weren't that many dogs, and there was one cluster of 5 dogs where people all knew each other, and the dogs all knew each other, and they were at the end. But I also sort of looked at the signs. Our signage stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, I walked by, I got to the far end of the quad, and I said, I don't think I saw any signs. There's the one sign that's up near where the poop station is there at the corner, and it's like, and first off, that's just a little like a no parking sign. You need a megaphone sign that says, keep your dog on a leash, like big. And then they have to face where people are walking. So you need signs that as they're walking around the quad, they see it. Instead, they're facing out, which means all you see is just the edge of the sign, and you don't bother seeing it. And then there's so many different ways that people can get in, that the fact that we have signs in a couple of places it's like no wonder there's so many people without leashes. We actually haven't sent the message that you need to have your dogs on a leash. They're there, but they're not big enough, they're not prevalent, prominent enough, and they're not visually emphatic enough to where people look at it and go, gosh, they got 20 signs here that say no dogs off leash in the quad.
I would
think they
disagree
need
with
it.
that, Gus. There are enough signs that people that walk their dogs there see those signs. There aren't that many signs. They know what the rule says.
Nobody's
on
following
the
the
sign,
rules.
but they just don't care.
I don't profess to know what's in the heads of every dog
I'm
owner.
gonna say in all honesty, I didn't see him for the longest time, because if you come up the side dirt path,
Right.
and then you cut through the middle, right, I would tell you, unless you come in the 4 corners, you don't see them. So if you do the loop around, and then I have a routine that I don't go in the 4 corners, just happens to be the way I walk.
Mm-hmm.
So I 100% hear where you're coming from, and I think that
Plus,
there's a better way.
when she does go in the corner, I see her, she's going like that.
Oh, he's on leash now, my little guy, I'm good about it.
I will say, so I'm dogless. We just changed our insurance policy where it looks like I'm going to remain dogless so I don't have an animal in this fight. But I will point out that right now at the hospital, it's kind of a unique situation. The only problem that I've had with dogs up there, since I don't have a dog and I'm not walking another dog, is worrying about hitting them in the car as I drive through.
Right.
Now, some of that goes away when Trinity takes the property.
Yeah.
And it may not relate to some of your other open spaces where you don't have cars driving through and everything
Right.
else. But it is a dog safety issue as well for the dog as well as for other dog walkers or dog owners. So, I mean, that's something to keep in mind.
Well, the only cars you gotta worry about are the property cars that drive around, they can come around the corner coming out of nowhere.
But, so if you go up to the parking at the back of the building, where building 10 is and everything else, and if you're driving up there and you're backing out and you're turning around or whatever, that's probably the most active area where the dogs are running loose, running in front of cars.
Yeah.
To get to their car, they're so excited to, So, I mean, it is an
There's been a
issue.
couple of dogs killed, yeah, in that
It is
exact
an
parking
issue.
lot, no doubt.
Okay. Other comments, Pete?
No, I would just, well, yes, okay. I would suggest that there is more of a problem than just the open spaces. I've noticed on my street that there have started to appear the bags of poop in the gutters. So I think that we do have a problem other spaces than open spaces. We have a problem in different parts of the town.
It's the other end of the dog control problem. I had
The delayed reaction. to
here we
everything.
are thinking
Come on.
about leashes, and we should be thinking about doggy diapers. There are, I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
Okay.
that was worthy of Mike Sullivan.
Beat me to it.
well, so just to drive things, I'm not in favor of having this committee deal with all the issues in town. Pete, if the issue that we're talking about that's townwide is doggy doo-doo bags, I agree, they're all over the place, and that is an issue, but I would sort of think that's not the focus of this. Maybe we want to add, or maybe if this committee can get this thing right, and we like what's there, maybe we can add more around dog, sanitary dog habits. But my biggest worry, Pete, is that we will dilute the focus of this committee to the point where we'll wind up right where the last one was, that we're trying to solve everything, and we'll wind up solving nothing.
Crawl, walk, run.
But I don't mind bringing things into the broader thing. I don't mind a second phase if that would, if that would address the issues you've got. Wouldn't even mind a separate thing if we're talking about, dog bags, because there's a whole separate issue about people walking their dogs on the athletic fields up at Wheelock, pooping on the soccer fields. That's like a hell. I mean, it's.
And they may address it, right? Again, I look at it as we want to get people on this
Right.
bylaw committee. We want to get people that we know are going to be sensitive to these areas.
Exactly.
Let's not dilute it. They may come back and say, you know what, we've talked about it, and we want to make it broader.
Yep.
But if we keep it like this, we have a higher likelihood of getting people
Yep.
that are going to be able to solve the biggest problems we have in town
Right.
right now.
Right.
And we will get quorum at
I-
town meeting next year.
I had a couple of questions around the change. Actually, they're your changes, Eileen. You dropped off Noon Hill Reservation, and you said that and Rocky Woods are both managed by trustees. I'll make the observation one is actively managed while the other is not. But then I had a question for Mark. Do town laws apply to open space under the control of the trustees?
It depends what it is, but that's generally private property.
Yeah.
So
Well,
for
so
this
the-
purpose, short answer is no.
Okay.
But some of it, I mean, some of it may, there's no hard yes or no, the general rule would be no.
So my first reaction when I first saw your correction was, well, yeah, but nobody's monitoring Noon Hill. Nobody's you don't have a guy at the gatehouse like you do at Rocky Woods. And then when I said, but on the other hand, is all of Noon Hill trustee,
No,
is there
there's
no?
some town land up there.
So there is some town land, and then, because then when I went next was Leslie Willits from the Conservation Commission, 2 years ago or something, went onto Noon Hill Trails to take down the mountain biking ramps that people
Right.
had built, and I'm saying, well, did she do that enforcement on the trustees' reservation?
No, the conservation just permitted some activity within the last few months up there, some kind of a trail thing or something. So there's definitely property that they have care, custody, and control of up there.
So I haven't heard complaints about the Noon Hill, so I'm okay
Right.
with dropping it for that reason alone. What happened is in our first discussion, when I was only focused on the hospital, you guys convinced me that there were more open spaces, and I just threw them all
The
in.
biggest one is the athletic fields at Wheelock.
Yeah.
It's been for years.
Right. So I'm happy to drop it, but it actually raised questions. And then the only other issue around committee membership, this is a personal preference, and I don't even know if they have anybody that wants to do it, but with the bullets that we had here, we added 2 to 3 dog walking advocates, and I put in professional dog walkers and dog owners that like to walk their dog in open space. Only because they've been the most responsible, organized dog advocacy group that I've seen is VizWiz. To my knowledge, they've never expressed any interest in being on this committee, but only because I respect them for what I've seen them do and how I've seen them deal with their dogs when they're there. My own personal preference was to at least reach out to them to see if anybody from that group wanted to be on this committee.
If they're a
But
Medfield resident.
But I wanted to be, yeah, because I think they actually live in Medfield.
Okay,
But I just wanted to make sure the membership had the room to do that.
What about the hunt club? They train hounds, and then, of course, they have their events up there, and those are gonna be it's gonna be on the field.
I don't think they're a problem. I mean, I don't,
No, I'm not saying problem, I mean, is it?
I don't
is it
think
an
that's,
exemption, is it a?
I think it would be, I mean,
oh, yeah.
because there's actually an event. I mean, they're not letting them roam.
Right,
I'm just
right.
saying, you
Yeah.
need to think about this, I mean, 'cause
First off, those dogs are probably under the best positive control of their owners.
Well,
than anybody.
actually, there's, in other places, I know of incidents that have occurred. They pick up a false scent or whatever, and they
Yeah.
go off trail, and there was an incident some years ago up in Hamilton, Wenham, where they came blasting out of the woods as kids were waiting at a bus stop, and all of a sudden, there were all these hounds milling around them. So,
not saying stop it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying
you
just
probably
be
at
aware
least
that
need to
every
acknowledge
time they
it.
come in my yard, I don't mind, I
Right.
think they're great.
Right.
Then the guy makes his, and they go
Right.
back over the wall.
I think they did it today up at State Hospital.
So I would, my own inclination would be to treat the Hunt Club as a stakeholder in this thing as opposed to, but I mean, if they had somebody that wanted to be on it, I wouldn't have any
Yeah,
problem.
but nor would I.
But I don't know that their
Not
dogs are
even
the
on
problem.
public property, are they? They're pretty much on property that's under their own control?
They use the state hospital
They
property.
use the state hospital,
They're gonna use the rail trail.
and they got access under the Trinity,
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
probably just have to be aware whether you don't have an unintended
no, I'm
consequence.
just saying,
Right.
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, we
Be
should,
aware.
just from a comment I just read from a text,
Yep.
the cemetery should be added to that.
That's another
Yeah, oh, yeah,
That was your,
I mean, the cemetery hasn't,
The
To my
cemetery has posted their own rules and regulations.
Right, they were
Right.
given that authority, and
Yeah.
that's how that was addressed previously. Town meeting gave them the authority.
and
to
as the
impose
one who
those.
triggered that, I can say that at least in the time I've been to the cemetery,
So that's a
I haven't
leash
seen
law. There's like no
enforcement
dog,
being a
actually, you should never have dogs in cemetery anyways.
right,
You have to remain on the paved pathways
Interesting, but on leash.
on leash.
but that wasn't good enough, which is why I brought this up to the selectmen several years ago. Because I watched a dog on a leash
Take a
pee
dog.
on two,
That's
one
horrible.
brand-new grave and one gravestone. And when I went and talked to the guy about it, he basically, because I was at our family's grave, and he said, you people that just come here for Memorial Day weekend. And he had no idea who he was talking to. And he came awfully close to crossing the line. But I waited until the police showed up, and he told me he would take care of him.
Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
just
that's
common
when
courtesy,
that
right?
rule, and it's not, to my knowledge, it's not been a problem since.
Okay,
so.
good.
but again, that's something the committee should
Yeah.
look at as part of their investigations as to what they wanna do.
Right. I wouldn't want that to open back up to, well, as long as my dog's under positive control, I can start
Hey,
bringing my
God, no,
dog to
no, no.
the cemetery. It's, right now, there's no dogs allowed at the cemetery.
Good.
That's how it should be. You know, you can't stop a dog from peeing.
No, no, no.
And so the idea that they're wandering through the cemetery peeing,
National Cemetery where my dad is, they have a sign, as soon as
Right.
you drive in, no dogs allowed.
Yep.
Now, my guy will stay in the car, he's never been out, but yeah, I
So-
don't,
yeah,
Can't
so with that one, with the two minor editorial changes I had, and I guess the disputed change that Eileen and I aren't on board with, Pete.
I had just one change under deliverable.
Yep.
Just that it should be acceptance by the Board of Selectmen to be included as an annual town meeting article, dropped the warrant report. It should be an annual town meeting
Yeah,
article.
Okay.
yeah, that's good, that's
Yep.
as in annual town, you don't need the 2023.
We can leave that can be fine, that's fine.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I can't imagine we wouldn't be, there's no circumstance I can envision where we wouldn't want an article. So we don't need to say if appropriate there, is all I'm saying.
right.
That's where we're driving.
Goal is to have it in.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep. So, you okay with that one discrepancy there, Pete?
I don't agree with it the way you've changed it, so you guys are
You can
gonna
vote,
have
yeah. Okay.
to vote it yourselves.
Okay. Motion?
Motion to accept the, how should we say it?
Charter.
The
Do-
charter,
Dog control bylaw
the
review.
dog control bylaw
Review.
review committee chart.
Okay, I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
And then I believe one of you has this in editable form, if you can make those changes and get it back to us.
I'm
Probably
sure I
two-
can.
Probably two of us do, but,
Yeah.
so if you do that,
Yeah.
you can have mine.
Okay.
It was only that one minor thing, and then if you go to the second page, that. That's it. Ignore all the rest. Well,
Oh, good, okay.
and
with
then
like-
Christine made that one.
Okay,
Yep.
So, yeah, you can.
all right, and I'll
that's
send it to
fine.
you to make sure.
That'll
Yep,
work.
that's
Yep.
perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect, all right, I'll do it at mine.
All right,
Okay.
next, discussion, discussion, the open space is next, okay. Discussion of school building committee appointment process. You want to start?
Well, so I have the application that was posted regarding Long Meadows Board. Right, in the spirit of this, I actually like it because there are some good questions. Now, we could tweak it a little here and there, but but you're getting some good information about the person that's applying, who they know, what their experiences are, have they been on other committees, things that we should know anytime we ask anyone to be in a committee.
I believe at least one of you asked me if it was possible if we did that as a Google form, could we also, somebody attach their resume and letter of interest, and we can do both of those, so you
Yeah,
can
you
get
should be
all
able
of
to.
that information.
I mean, you're working on a draft for us on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Pete?
I think we just need to get people appointed and get them to work, so I'm not,
Well,
Too
but I think this is a discussion about the process. So one part of it, so you're okay with the Google form?
yeah.
So the only comment I had on the Google form from Longmeadow is it had people applying to the category of slots that are the
Right.
appointments, and I
Yeah.
think there should be a single uniform application.
I
You're
think-
applying for appointment to the committee.
Yes.
Yeah, and we agreed upon that the last time we
Right.
talked about it, I think.
And then basically, I think all three of, incidentally, I think this form, it's all three appointing authorities have to be on board with it.
Yes.
We'd have to talk to
Scott?
Scott. I believe Scott is handling his appointments on his own. I know he's been doing some discussions on his own, but he's gonna have his meeting tomorrow, and I can talk with him about that, but
Was he letting us know who he's
Yeah, so how, I
picking?
mean, how do we make our appointments if we don't know who he's appointing?
I mean, because I'd like to think that the people that are applying to the three groups and not just to one, because that kind of
So
muddies
is
things.
Scott, well, but let's work on that. for a
So
minute.
let me just clarify something. I thought you said you didn't want them to apply to individual groups. You just want people
Correct.
to apply to the committee.
Sure,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Okay,
So we all know the pool of people.
right. So that's gonna become a timing issue for you with the school committee as well, unless you're having a joint meeting and considering all of the applications.
No, it's just that the flow of applicants
Okay,
into a central database.
okay.
There has to
And
be
then-
some coordination about who's,
Right.
because if
Who's
the
appointing
school committee and the
first.
select board and the moderator are all appointing the same person.
Well, that is correct, and so my thought, this is a thought, this isn't a position, my thought was those all come into a single place.
Mhm.
I would trust the town administrator to use basic judgment about, hey, here's one it sounds like probably would go to the moderator. This one is someone with school experience, that's gonna go to the school committee. We would all know, we would all have access to all of the applicants. We would know what the initial, it's like the triage entry at the emergency room. They all got triaged and went to places. We would know where they went. And we would, I hope, know if any appointing authority has made a decision, we would know that that decision has been made about that particular person. If the town moderator, or if any of us for that matter, had an opinion about somebody, and this is, Scott should have the flexibility to do what he wants, so everything I'm saying here is not trying to force anything. If the town moderator wants to be able to operate with full discretion and judgment on who the town moderator wants to appoint, I think that's absolutely within the purview of the town moderator. In fact, could be a very important role for the town moderator. The only thing that I would suggest to Scott is if that's what you're doing and you know that you've got somebody that you want to appoint, just ask them to submit an application.
Oh, definitely.
And then that way we all know who it is, we all know what the background is, and it gets triaged to Scott. If he had already come to the conclusion before the
There's-
application went in.
There's nothing to stop you if you want to, is to have a combined preliminary meeting or something too.
Yeah, I just don't know whether that helps. Because what I'm getting at is we've each been given a different set of criteria. Certainly, the mandated positions, we should be able to figure out who they are. I think we already know one of ours, unless
Right.
somebody's got, that's Mike Weber from the Permanent Planning and Building Committee. Now, we haven't appointed him, but he's already sort of in the distribution list, and that he's probably the one option that was willing or able or considered to be the best choice. So, and I think he'll be great. So personally, I'm good with it. We haven't heard from the planning board, but, so there's certain decisions that will be made fairly quickly just because of the way the mechanics work.
And I think after each group expresses their preferences, those preferences can be looked at together and probably worked out pretty quickly.
So what, I'm not sure what you're saying there, Pete.
I'm saying that each group should just make its own, we'll have a central portal for the applicants, and
Yep.
then each of the three groups will make their list of their appointments, they'll share those, and we'll see if there are problems. And if there
So
are
before-
problems, then we'll work them out.
So, I think I agree with you. I'd make one subtle change. Would you allow the ones that are being designated by other committees? I don't think you'd have to hold off I think what you're saying is, make the decisions on who you want to appoint. Don't make the appointments until all three groups have seen all three groups' appointments, and I think I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. The only question I had is, in the interest of expediting things, is there any reason to hold back on the two, or the one or two? 'Cause Scott's got one, we've got two. School committee is gonna designate two of their own. I don't think there's any reason to hold back on the
No.
appointments of those kind of prescribed
No.
positions.
No.
Is that,
And we're still waiting on the AG, I think, aren't we, so that
We
we
still
can.
have to
They
wait.
requested an extension,
right. The AG requested an extension?
Just the-
90-day
no,
extension.
The original date,
Okay, okay.
October 2nd, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so we're still
Yeah,
dealing
we're
with October
still
2nd.
dealing.
Okay. I was gonna say, we should do 2023. So we can't make any appointments for sure until after that. We have 2.5 weeks left in this month. There's no reason we can't start to work, and Pete, I agree, I think it probably does make sense for us to share our designees with the other two appointments, so that we're all comfortable that we've covered the waterfront.
Yeah, we talk about transparency. If we're gonna do anything transparent at the beginning, it should be this,
Yeah.
that everyone's on board and is that a question from?
I was just gonna say that if you have, I think what would be helpful too is if you have more candidates than you do have and you have slots, and you have a situation where you have two candidates who are equally qualified, what's going to be your own criteria for having to figure out who you're going to choose?
The criteria in terms of qualifications is in the bylaw. Beyond that, the appointment authorities have a discussion about who they think would be the best choice.
Okay, so
I don't even know how to answer your question, because I don't know when you say you have two identical candidates, what would you use to differentiate them? It's like, well, I don't know, you just said they're identical. Chances are they're not. And I would think that, to Pete's point, the full constellation of members would probably be an influence, I would think. So I don't know how to answer your question on that.
I guess the question is also how much of this is going to be a open and transparent conversation, I guess, in terms of.
I think we have to pick in the open, right? We can't pick behind
Oh, if
closed
it's a
doors.
committee decision like the school committee, it's subject to the open meeting law. The moderator is an individual, he's not subject to the open
Right.
meeting law.
All right.
No, and I'm talking about the
So you mean,
selectmen
well,
appointments.
we can't get together to decide outside of an executive session. That's not an allowable reason
Right.
to hold an executive session. So there's no way for us to do that other than in an open meeting. I guess I erroneously took your question to be how much of this will be a public participation process. And I don't think those decisions will be a public participation process, but they will be a public observation
Oh,
process.
no, I wasn't
Okay,
looking at
okay.
participation.
Yeah,
I was
like
looking
I
at
said,
observation,
I
no.
erroneously read something into your question that was what I reacted to. But it's gotta be an open meeting. We don't have a choice.
Okay.
That was just a discussion, right? So I think, we're
Nope,
not
I'll-
voting on
we'll-
anything.
nope, I'll send out a
I
draft.
think we have, you heard, I do think Pete's thought about making sure that we all, before we kind of pull the switch on all of the appointments, that we actually be aware of what the full configuration looks like. That makes sense.
Okay.
And so that would be our sentiment, subject to the views of the other two appointing bodies.
Excellent.
All right. Let's see, next. Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee assignments. We have
Appointments.
Appointments.
appointments. We have Planning Board member Sarah Raposa, Conservation Committee member Kat Scott, Parks and Recreation Commission member, that's vacant right now, Member at Large Jerry Potts, Member at Large George Lester, Member at Large Jessica Riley. And so what this will leave us with is two open spots. One is Parks and Rec Commission member, and the other is an additional member at large.
Okay.
We have a volunteer for that spot, but because we couldn't publish her name in
Okay.
tonight's agenda, our intentions, I believe, will be to handle that appointment at our next meeting
Yep, correct.
with her name properly
Absolutely.
posted.
Okay.
So, I think that's it on that.
I had a conversation with the chair of the Conservation Commission about this committee. And she had a conversation with the agent, who is apparently now, they're using some sort of professional consultant
Mhm.
who's apparently very qualified, and he apparently has worked on these sorts of, he's worked as a consultant for these sorts of committees in the past. And what he shared was that it was very important to have, that the consultant that's gonna get used doesn't know the town lands, and it's very important to have committee members that know the town lands. And so, I don't know how much knowledge each of these people has about the town land, but, you know, apparently that's the quality of your output is gonna be based on the amount of knowledge that they have on the town lands.
I think George Lester's been,
George's been on the planning board
George's been on the planning
forever.
board forever.
Yeah.
Sarah, I think. could-
Sarah's been doing all these hikes.
Well, yeah, Sarah and Jessica Riley have been doing the hikes on the conservation land and mapping things out in their conservation group. I believe they do every Friday. They've had a few incidents. They had a bee sting incident. They've had, they've had a couple of things on
Who's,
their
that's
watch.
Sarah and Jessica that are doing that?
Mhm.
And then if it's a recreation plan, I mean, I know
Oh, good.
Jerry's been involved with.
When I heard
baseball stuff.
that recommendation, I thought, well, Bobby Kennedy's the one that knows all the places in town, but apparently Bobby was asked and he said he was too busy to do it, so Kat Scott's doing it for the Concom, but apparently Bobby said that he could help her.
Did the conservation agent say it's important to have somebody who's perambulated the town?
No.
It'll come in handy at some point, I
It's
swear.
probably,
I swear.
It's on my resume.
it was expressed that it would be helpful to have somebody
Gonna
who
show up
had
on my next charter.
a disability. Because there are issues about disability access, and there's nobody in this group that I don't think has that sort of knowledge of disability. That apparently has to be part of the plan.
Right, ADA accessibility is a key part of the plan.
But Sarah would know that, wouldn't she?
Yeah, I think what Pete is saying is that you choose somebody from that community to put on the
Do we
committee
have
with
an
direct
active
knowledge.
disability commission at the moment?
Not an active one, no.
Because it used to be Fred,
Rogers, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that we have a good candidate that would fit that particular bill.
Right.
I wouldn't be opposed to appointing someone if we had a candidate, but I'm not sure that we do. I wouldn't feel like we absolutely have to have that if we have somebody who's familiar with the requirements.
Right. So tonight, knowing that we have 2 vacant spots, are we just accepting who we know today, or do we pushing this off to the 27th?
That's up to you.
I would appoint them today for,
Okay.
I mean, as long as it's on the agenda, then it,
And then just hold
Just-
off on the one that?
yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
that's what I'd do.
Okay.
Move to appoint the people on the list to the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a contract with the Collins Center for Classification and Compensation Study.
Correct. This is being funded with a grant that we had received at the same time we received the GFOA budget documents. And the price of the contract is $30,000. We have $25,000, which we funded from the grant, and $5,000, which has been carried over from the last compensation that was done, I believe it was 2013. 2013.
And so the last sentence here, if more than 63 position descriptions are created, an additional cost may be incurred.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, I mean?
It's $250 a position.
But would there be any reason, I mean, do you see that, are you actually already anticipating that there may be the need for additional positions, and hence that's what this
No, so we currently have 63 titles that we've identified as being carried forward in the next compensation plan.
Yep.
While going through that, we may find that we have one or two that we did not include,
Okay.
that were just inadvertently left off.
Okay, okay.
But we've had 4 or 5 different iterations of this list, and I feel strongly that 63 is good.
Okay, but it's only $250, okay,
It's $250 a position if that's
okay.
added.
Pete, questions?
No.
The only question I had, Christine, I was trying to, this is fine, the contract looks like it's gonna be a good one. The only question I had is, they're gonna go through and they're gonna review all these, they're gonna do a compensation study. Obviously, the choice of comparator communities is gonna be a big deal. At the end, I was trying to play out the dynamics of, so they come up with whatever they come up with.
Yep.
Is that, do we wind up with, let's for argument's sake say that we are 20% under market in all 63 positions. That all just goes out in the public, and then we have like a massive labor issue with people who are saying that we're underpaid all at once? How does the dynamics work at the tail end?
So the Personnel Board reviews and decides how to implement the plan, whether or not they accept all the recommendations upon their review, and then we try to, if we can afford it, implement it at the next town meeting.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a phased approach, and it's a first year and a second year phasing in.
Okay, and that would be, I mean, it probably wouldn't be 20%, it might be or 5% or something like that.
We haven't.
And so what's our intention for dealing with the town employee? So this plan gets produced, it goes to the Personnel Board, it's a public document at that point?
Yes, and all the employees are participating in this throughout the process.
And they will see the results of it?
Yes.
So they will all know whatever this report says, they'll all be aware of?
So if they're overpaid,
And we have,
We'll have happy employees.
we had that in the 2013 survey, and people were very unhappy with the market survey in 2013. I think given some recent developments with some employees who are taking bigger and larger opportunities, we're finding that we may not be as marketable as we were in the past.
But I guess what I'm saying is that if this is all cards are face up on the table, then we'll need to be thoughtful about how, depending on what it says, this is either a big deal or not, but we have to be thoughtful about how we explain whatever it is we decide to do to the employees.
Absolutely.
And which is a good way to be anyway. But, anyway, I was playing it out there going, this could be interesting, given where the job market's going right now. It could raise some interesting dynamics, or not, but it could, so.
And part of what we'll work with them is a costing out of when we move people. So they'll have the existing salary structure of where we are, and then where they are recommending people will be, so we'll have a total cost at the end as well.
Okay.
So we'll know what we are looking at.
okay.
All right. So, a motion there?
Vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a contract with the Collins Center for Classification and Compensation Study.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Which you already did, right?
Vote to sign contract, that's done, that was approved. No, Gentleman? Yeah, Gentleman was approved. The other one was deferred. Environmental Partners was deferred. Oh, I switched, that's why I have this written down somewhere, but not there. All right, vote to sign the special conditions to provider agreement with Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Health and Human Services, Office of Medicaid, in order to participate in the Massachusetts Certified Public Expenditure Program for governmental ambulance providers. Is Chief Carrico on?
This is Chief Carrico. This is a recommendation. I apologize, he couldn't be here tonight. He was actually at training. He's very interested in participating in this project, and he has been working with the financial team over the last few weeks. It's going to take a lot of participation from 3 departments: accounting, the treasurer's office, and the fire department. And what it will allow us is to submit what our actual costs are to Mass Health and to Medicare and Medicaid for our ambulance runs. And so we have the opportunity to receive the full cost of those runs instead of a smaller portion.
It says the full cost of those runs allowed for Medicaid, right? So we're
Yeah.
not talking about a commercial run.
Right.
We're talking about a government specified rate.
Yep.
Questions, Eileen?
No, because I talked to Christine earlier today just to get a better understanding as to what this is all about, and
I did get an answer to one of your questions, and we currently have an 86% collection rate
Oh, good.
using the third-party billing company.
Okay.
So.
Questions, Pete?
No.
So I have, it's not exactly a question, it's a reaction. And the one question I do have is, are we highly confident that us agreeing to this will result in us getting increased payments because of being under reimbursed? Because what I did is I went through the contract, and I had a green highlighter and a red highlighter. The green highlighters are the parts of the contract that are in our favor, talking about how we can get paid more. So you can see this little spot there, it's all green. The red part is how we're gonna have to pay the state back if we get paid too much. The further red part is how we're gonna pay the state back if we get too much. This is all the provisions that we have about how we're gonna have to pay, how we have to prove that we really incur the cost, because if we don't properly report the cost, then they still can look for having the money back. And one of the interesting things for me in here is that in this spot, if we don't pay on time, not only do we owe them the money, but we also owe them interest. However, when they have overpaid, when they've overcharged us and they owe us money back, they don't owe us any interest. So everything that's red on this is basically contract verbiage that's in the favor of the state. Everything in green, that one little spot there, and this one little spot there that says we can get out of it if we want to, is in our favor. So I read this going, what the heck is this? And I came out saying, well, this whole thing is structured, worded in a way that's totally in favor of the state. So I need somebody to tell me, yeah, but as a practical matter, we always get underpaid, and this really is a program that's designed to get us more money.
That is how Chief Carrico explained it to me. But I do want to keep that to show him.
There you go. Don't lose it. I don't have to do it again. Red is bad,
If you
green
would
is
rather,
good.
if you would rather defer and have him come in and speak more
As
to
long
it,
as
that's
you're-
fine.
As long as you're assuring us that this is something that we are highly confident is gonna result in us getting more money and not being hornswoggled by the state's lawyers into owing them money.
I believe this is the same conversation he had with Georgia, and he conferred to her that he believes he will get more money by doing this.
Right,
So-
I'm willing to
He
accept
gave me
that.
the example of another town that picked up 6 figures.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way they sold it. If you looked at the marketing
Yes.
thing, that's
Yeah.
how it was sold. I'm just reading the contract and it's going. this
And
thing's
how long's
all-
this contract good for?
Carrico's or this contract? Carrico's contract or this contract?
No, we're good with Chief Carrico. How long is this one good for?
I think it's just a year, I believe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's,
And you can bail out of it.
I could be wrong, but I think it's just the state administering federal funds anyway.
It's a modification, it's actually a modification to an agreement, so I bet you it goes, I think it's permanent. I don't think there's a contract term on this. This is actually an agreement to modify the original existing terms of this provider agreement that's already in place.
okay.
So we can bail out on it, but it's not a contract, it's actually an agreed to modification of terms.
All right.
Chief's gonna start sending Mo in with his contract. Okay, I guess we'll go to a motion.
I would move that we sign the contract that's been discussed.
All right.
Special conditions to the provider agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. With the assurances that we're gonna get more money from it, not lose money on it. Vote to sign a letter to allow Scott DiPiolo to operate a livery out of his residence. And this,
So Scott has been meeting with Brittany and I, and he is applying with his own personal vehicle to operate a livery service to provide airport service. And in order to even complete the application with Massport to allow him into the livery lot, he needs a letter saying that we have no objection to him keeping that car. I believe he told us it was going to be, I want to say it was an Escalade, but it's of that size, SUV.
Okay.
So
I certainly don't have any problem with that.
No.
That'll look fine.
I would move to vote to sign the letter to allow Scott DiPiola to operate a livery out of his residence.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And vote to sign the updated agreement regarding ground lease with the Kingsbury Club to reflect the Kingsbury Club's proposed refinance loan amounts. Was there
I'm
anything
gonna
more with
recuse
that?
myself.
Oh,
Yes.
Yep.
Yep, I think that got added. Mark, you were going to speak to this.
Because there was two copies. It was one that was redlined, and then it was the one that they're,
We did it, we signed this in 2017 to allow them to refinance. It's the same document simply with the new loan information inserted, that's what the highlight is, but the boilerplate remained the same as the earlier agreement.
I'm okay
Okay.
with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay.
Motion?
Motion
Oh.
to approve, to authorize the chair to sign, oh, no, wrong one. Flip my page too soon.
There's two
Item
agreements.
Item 14.
Yep. Vote to sign the updated agreement regarding ground lease with Kingsbury Club to reflect the Kingsbury Club proposed refinance loan amounts.
Second, all
There's
those
two
in favor?
agreements, aren't there?
What's that?
Or was one just the old one?
I think
There
one
is
was
actually,
the old
oh,
one.
no, yeah.
Yeah, there's an
had
old
a-
one and a new one, yep.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Motion carries 2 with 1 abstention.
Love how quick this MBTA thing came together. Woof.
Super exciting.
Let's see, next one, I vote to authorize the chair to sign the MHP MBTA Community Early Action Technical Assistance Award Letter / contract in order to comply with the state's new multifamily zoning requirement. I received the email directly with the agreement set up for e-signing, but I didn't do anything with it yet because I needed approval.
No, I think it's fantastic. Yep, I saw Sarah last night. We talked about this.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll send it off tomorrow. Citizen comment. This is like the last man and woman standing here. It's kinda- Consent agenda. So the items are: request to place sandwich boards advertising the Medfield Rail Trail grand opening on October 1st for the 2 weeks leading up to the event at the usual locations. Second, Coolidge.
I have a change to this one that you're about to read.
Coolidge
Okay.
Corner?
Yep.
Would you like to read it?
Just to update, so Coolidge Corner is requesting the use of Medfield State Hospital for the following dates. Friday, October 21st, they will be showing The Wolfman and American Werewolf in London. On Saturday, October 2nd, instead of showing The Bride of Frankenstein, they'd be showing Beetlejuice. And instead of The Bride of Chucky, they'll be showing The Exorcist.
Oh, geez.
Wonderful.
And then on,
Neither, and The Exorcist is?
The Exorcist is either, but.
So Jennifer Tilly is in Bride of Chucky.
So it was a werewolf theme in the first weekend, and they were gonna do brides in the
Yep.
second weekend, but they backed off of that.
And they're not able to get the rights to show the movies, which is the change. And then on Sunday, October 23rd, they would be able to show Dracula, and then one of my favorites, they'd be showing The Lost Boys.
The which one?
The Lost Boys. Love that movie. Yeah.
So where do they show these? Like just,
So when you the main field in the front,
yeah?
so right behind the buses, it's a drive-in theater, and you park your car, and
Great.
they set the
The big movies?
the movie screen towards the end.
Sure
and
they
then
set up
With
recyclables.
your speakers and your car?
yeah, they have a whole sound system set up and everything. And then I actually put Mark, who runs Coolidge Corner Theater, in touch with Gene Minio, and they're going to do kind of some cross promotions with each other, so you can come hang out at the. I believe they have Oktoberfest for at least one of them. Come hang out there, and then come down and watch the movie. So
Drinking
they're
and
gonna work
pass out
together.
watching movie
I, I wasn't going there, but
I did.
It's like an old drive-in movie theater.
yeah. So they're
Tailgates
they're
and
gonna
everything,
yeah
or-
they're gonna work together. So should be a great cross promotion for them.
Okay, the third request to place sandwich boards advertising the opening of registration for Medfield Youth Lacrosse from October 1st through the 15th at the usual locations. Fourth request for a block party on Sunday, October 2nd from 3 to 6 p.m. in the Gun Hill Estates neighborhood from 95 Wood End Lane to the intersection of Wood End Lane and Country Way.
Nice.
Final request is request from Zulo Gallery for several one-day beer wine licenses for their Thursdays on the deck from 5 to 11 p.m. on September 22nd, September 29th, and October 6th. And I assume they probably, it's the Zulo Gallery. They must have recycling already.
You just took the
right?
words out of my mouth, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
think we have to necessarily make a big deal about that.
Right.
So do we have a motion to approve the 5 items on the consent agenda with the movie titles as reported amended by Christine?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, these were the old meeting minutes, right?
I think these are some. I think
These are the
were already on
ones, so I think
I've approved these.
I've approved them. If they were the ones we carried forward, you and I are both great. Pete, have you done them?
I've looked at them and made edits, yep.
You made edits, are they minor enough where we can approve them with
Yeah.
minor edits?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we all had some minor edits.
Yep.
So I take a motion to approve, I think I can do these all three at once if
Yep.
you call out the dates.
Move to approve the minutes for June 14, June 28, July 12, 2022.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Town administrator updates.
I have some great news to share for one of our employees, but some sad news for the town. Gary Pelletier, our building commissioner, has accepted a position in Norwood as their building commissioner. His last day here will be October 7th, but then he's going to continue on with us in a part-time capacity until we are able to hire a full-time building commissioner on. So similar setup that we had when John Naff moved to Rentham, so which would be very helpful to us.
Time
And
to bring
then-
them back.
What's that?
Time to bring them back.
I know. And then I just wanted to announce congratulations to Chief Carrico, who was just notified on Friday that he received the AFG fire grant for $98,000, which will completely replace all of our 29 portable radios in 1 year versus the 2 years we had them in the
Oh,
capital
great.
budget.
Great,
So-
all right,
Really, really great.
yeah.
So
Okay, that's it.
that's it.
Let's see, next meeting dates, September 27th, October 11th, October 25th,
I'm away the week of the 27th, just so you
Okay.
know.
the week of the 27th.
We have a special agenda that night.
Go for it. Knock yourself silly.
I take that as a challenge. We'll have to open up some public hearings and shut them down just for practice.
Don't make me sick Chris on you.
All right, selectmen reports. Eileen?
Alrighty, since we last got together, I know I made it up to one of the CAM events. I'm trying to think. I know I'm forgetting my notes on this one. The ice cream social got rained out, unfortunately, last week for the realty group. So, I don't think it's.
Sounds like you had a fun couple of weeks. It's all.
No, you know, I'm
blurred
trying,
for
it is a blank. I went down, and I had to help put my mom down the Cape, and, yeah, so I'm brain dead on this one. I usually have my notes, and I'm not prepared for that tonight.
Pete?
I had office hours last Friday and had a lot of business for people. Energy Committee met. They've got a new structure. They're gonna come and talk to you guys about their new structure. They're divided their committee into 5 pillars: buildings, transportation, renewables, town liaison, and at large. And then the TOMCAP met as well to work on the climate action plan for the town, and that's it.
They just need to be aware, those are subcommittees, they all have to function
Yep, there we
in
are.
compliance with the open meeting law.
Yes, they're aware.
Okay, and then I mentioned at the start of the meeting, Carl Schwartz passing away. I went to his funeral. That was a pretty short notice thing. He passed away on the 30th of August, and the funeral was like the following Wednesday, so it was pretty quick. His son came up from Georgia, I think is where, so it was nice to meet his family. I didn't really
His
know
wife
him.
had died within the last.
Yeah, it was I don't know how to, I'm not sure whether you say it's good or bad in the sense that they both made it most of the time, but I think the last several months, or actually the last year, has probably been pretty tough, because I think they both were dealing with some issues. So I also watched, so the MMA, I don't know if Pete, you might have watched it, but there was a webinar for the Mass Municipal Association doing a legislative update. So I signed up for it, and then I got tied up for the start of it. I missed the front end of it, but I saw the back end and couldn't really quite piece together all the things that are going on, but I know from they sent the presentation around, and there is a recording, so I'll get the link to the recording and forward the recording to you. I know they talked for sure about the MBTA communities stuff before I got there, so I couldn't hear what they had to say. They were talking a little bit about the budget, the various things going on in the budget, and projecting some things in it. Based on what I did catch, it sounds like, well, actually, the most interesting thing that was there was I think it's 63F. It's a weird law. And what it was passed in 2013. What it basically was a law that said if the state's revenues go up at a rate that's higher than the growth in wages and things like, basic that cost growth, the excess needs to be returned to the taxpayers.
That goes way back.
Yeah, it goes back to like either.
80s, I think.
Well,
I think it was 86.
It had three, maybe it was 83 then.
I think it was
they
86.
Or 86. And they said the 1 year that this provision applied was in 1987 until this past year. And the last, in 1987, there was like, I don't know, $100 million or something like this. This one is $2.9 billion in excess. Huh?
Is it COVID money or something?
Well, it was basically, I think what it is the state scaled back their budgets, but they weren't expecting the economic surge to come back quite the way it did. So suddenly, the COVID probably held all the wages down, but suddenly there's a surge in revenues coming back into the state. So there's this huge overshoot, and the law basically says you have to give it back to people. So they got to figure out how they're going to issue refunds to everybody for the surplus that the law from 1980.
Bear in mind, they already had plans for that money before this issue arose, so.
Yeah, I'm sure they did, and what wasn't quite clear to me was it seemed like some of that money was still going in the directions
The
that.
last I knew, they were looking at ways to challenge.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the discussion that I caught, the part that I caught, sounded like it was in the works, and the only question is, somebody said, well, should we start seeing the refunds in October? And the answer I got was, well, that would be the absolute earliest you'd see it. That's probably optimistic, so.
And both the gubernatorial candidates are in favor of returning the money, so it's very likely to
What else you
happen.
gonna say, you know?
Right. Yeah, so if they return it before November, we're in good shape.
Okay.
Maybe not so much. And then I attended the Livingston Taylor performance at the camp performance. Chris was there, Jerry was there. Gorgeous Saturday afternoon. Couldn't have gotten better weather. Nice crowd. Livingston Taylor is great, but the two warm-up bands were great as well. So it was funny. Some people just came in for Livingston Taylor, and we showed up at the very start, and it was like, you guys screwed up. You showed up late. You should have come here earlier. So if nothing else, I think that kind of an event is something that's going to put the state hospital and the chapel, CAM on at least the regional radar for the quality of what it's got. It just had a nice crowd there. I watch the crowd sometimes because I look at age, and it seems to me that in some of these, it seems like, gosh, there's some people that are pretty old around here. But there were some younger families that came in on that one so it was I thought it was a nice mix of people that were there. I don't think it could have been a nicer day for an outdoor concert. It was just wonderful. And for me, it's the first time there's been a paid event there where people had to buy tickets. And I think it was planned for 500, and it seemed, I think that I talked with Jerry, it was somewhere north of 400 that actually showed up. So it was and when the folks making tequila, the margaritas, they're sitting there saying, do we have any more clean ice? And they say, because all that I've got is a cooler full, and I'm not sure how long that's going to last. I think they were in good shape. I just think that this is going to turn into a very nice venue. It's the thing that's gonna be there in its entirety. From everything I can see, I'm glad we have Trinity as a developer for everything else that's being developed. And maybe this is a honeymoon period where everything is just coming up roses, but I think this is gonna be a tremendous asset to the town, to the region, to the state. I've occasionally said, what we want it to be is Tanglewood East, and it's like, it might, caliber-wise, I don't know where your size-wise is gonna get there, but
There's a fair number of performers like Livingston Taylor who make the rounds.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this weekend's supposed to be phenomenal.
I was just gonna say, do not miss Martin Sexton.
Yeah.
He will knock your socks off.
They're anticipating a really big crowd because we're getting him
Yep.
at zero cost, but he's actually having functions around town, around Boston.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Where they're charged events. So,
He sells out a lot of
Yeah.
most of his shows.
yeah, so it's exciting.
So that last part, nobody heard because Chris isn't using the microphone, but that was a plug for Saturday's Martin Sexton performance. It's from everything that anybody who knows what they're talking about says, it's gonna be spectacular. He's a spectacular performer, and it's free. And, we bring in named performers, you don't always get them for free. So, sounds like it's gonna be a worthwhile concert, and it'll be interesting to see if we have parking space and crowd control problems for the first time. We'll see.
I'll give you one quick update, then I had my brain blip.
Yep.
Is I did have the Affordable Housing Trust meeting at the beginning of the month, but followed it up last night with the site visit for Dave McCready and Craig Rafter
Okay.
for the Jacob Cushman Realty Trust.
Okay.
So it's the 6 apartments that they're gonna be adding 2 onto. We had a neighborhood invite, and the neighbors that came were 100%
This
supportive
is
of
the
it.
one on North Street?
This is the one right across the street from Brothers, next to Avenue. So where
Oh.
it's 6 apartments today with adding on to 2, all 8 will qualify for our subsidized housing index.
Which, it's not the Avenue building.
No, it's the white building
It's
right
right
next
next
to it.
door,
Literally,
right.
if you,
Behind the flower park.
right behind, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, so Dave McCready and Craig Rafter were there last night.
Okay.
Super nice. They
Neighbors are all on.
all
board.
supportive. They love it. It's gonna get a facelift, new windows, so it'll look nice and clean.
Okay.
And all apartments are being treated the same way.
Then we just need another one of those and we'll be at 10%.
Right.
So, sorry about that, my
Okay.
brain blip.
Let's see, so I think,
You need
that
to go to
takes care, we
executive
need to
session.
go into executive section. So, we need a motion. We are going to be going into executive session for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, i.e. the Medfield State Hospital. And I didn't bring all my,
I think you have to declare that.
yeah, I do, I have to
Yeah.
declare, I just didn't bring my script, I wasn't thinking, so.
Here's-
you
here's-
got- that's great. Let's see,
Script,
let's see. No, I moved to elect as chair of the Board of Selectmen, that's the wrong one. Shoot,
Do you have your script off the top of your head for Gus?
what happened to the file? I did that.
I
Take
have,
care,
I'm
thanks for
writing
coming.
that on my thing. I'll see you at 10.
There's a whole, here's the motion right here.